Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Art of the Hunt. Today we got Pablo with us, and from Cedar Ridge, Daniel Williams.
What's going on, guys?
Doing good today?
Well,
Absolutely.
it's a pleasure to be here, though.
It is, and I'm glad to meet y'all guys.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
Yeah, glad to have y'all over.
Yeah, y'all have an awesome place here.
Yeah, thank you. I don't
Well,
get
it's
too
his.
much.
Oh, yeah. They're not together.
Got a spare bedroom. We could hunt every day.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the plan after all. I mean,
That's right.
Yeah, man.
So, Pablo, give us a little bit of background about yourself, and then Daniel will jump into you.
Well, I was born and raised Central American, Costa Rica. You know, hunting is illegal and all that. But, man, I was speaking with Olivia Glasgow one of these days. I told her, like, I was born a redneck. I just didn't know that because I was born in a different country. So I was always with a slingshot and blowguns and things like that, chasing the small mammals. As the years went by, different situation, you know, I end up in the States. I end up right here. And next thing you know, I was like, man, that'd be nice, you know. And somebody's like, you can go hunt, you know. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, there's public land. And I was like, what is public? And next thing you know, man, I'm lost, you know, like completely I just lost my head and went right into it.
It's just in your blood.
Yeah, and just to hit a brick wall right away because I didn't know what I was doing, no background, nothing at all. So it was like out of nowhere, like, yes, I'm excited, I'm ready to go hunt, but I've never done this before. I have no experience when it comes to these animals. I don't know what to look for. I don't know how they behave. I don't know what they eat. And man, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a journey since then. And I'm still learning, you know. That's when I'm around Daniel, Mr. Michael, Mr. Tony, Mr. Jamie, and so many people, Parker McDonald's, and so on and on and on. And everybody just kind of like helped me out. And everybody has different approaches, different techniques, and different tactics. And what I do is I kind of like I pick the best of everybody. Even Shane Parker, man. I mean, he threw me off one of these days with the crazy thing about the hub thermal.
Yeah.
It's just too much, you know.
Information overload.
Yes, I was like, it's overwhelming.
Hey, it confuses me, too, talking about thermal hubs. That's still confusing to me.
Well, it's one of those things that'll almost make you not go hunt.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about earlier. Like, you learn too much and you get out of the beginner's luck mindset.
Yes.
Yep.
You know, beginner's luck, a lot of that is just not knowing what you're doing, and you just go deer hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you overthought something and never even hunted because you didn't need to hunt that day?
Yeah.
And then some guy kills something or some kid kills something, and you're like, I can't believe he killed that today. You know, it wasn't supposed to happen today. It's like, well, they went deer hunting. You didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to overthink different styles and everything. You really just got to pick your style that works for you and hone in on that and master that.
It's just a deer. You know,
Yeah.
we're people. It's just a deer. Like, we're smarter than they are. You just have to remember that.
Well, sometimes it's like, man, if I learn too much, I ain't even going to be able to go hunting. Like, I need to stay where I'm at, where I still, you know, feel the urge to risk it.
You'll learn not to go. It's like you'll teach yourself so much that you can't ever go because it's always the wrong conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
It is. So, Daniel, give him a little bit of background about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Birmingham, so I was like you. I grew up redneck, living in the middle of a city, and I never fit in ever. It was like I moved up here probably 17 years ago, and it was like I wish I had lived here my whole life. In the middle of nowhere, there's plenty of deer, and there's turkeys and fishing, you know. But we grew up hunting in Selma, down in South Alabama, so it was always swampland, flat swampland. We hunted ditches, creeks, swamps, you know. So I started hunting when I was probably 5. My dad started taking me. I killed my first deer when I was 8, my first buck when I was 12. And shortly after that, we went to trophy management back in the 80s or in the early 90s. And before anybody else really was on trophy management, we had a wildlife biologist, and he was taking care of us and stuff. So I started trophy hunting the big 10 point up top up here. I killed him when I was 15. So like from then on, I was taught you can't shoot little bucks that were under this program. So I grew up not pulling the trigger unless it was something I was going to mount or whatever. And I mean, I've never killed any giant deer, but at the same time, for hunting club lands, I got to where I just didn't want to shoot little deer. So I've always tried to find the bigger deer on whatever property I had access to hunt, and learn from a lot of guys in them hunting clubs that the guys that were always killing the biggest deer, I would go and sit with and eat at night. You know what I mean? Like I'd talk with them and figure out what they did. So I've learned so many strategies from so many different people.
Yeah.
You know, that because everybody hunts differently, but there's a lot of guys that kill a lot of big deer that don't do anything the same as somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting when you learn enough from enough people, because every time you walk in the woods, you're looking at a different scenario. And all of a sudden you start picking up on that, and it's like, well, the way this road has this bend in it and the way this ditch has this turn, you're like, that reminds me of this. And all of a sudden, I always tell everybody, history always repeats itself.
It does.
That's the biggest thing. So like historical rubs, there's going to be a buck there. Big historical rubs, there's going to be a big buck there. It's always, it never changes. If there are doe tracks crossing the road, like we found last week, there will always be doe tracks crossing that road until they come in there and cut that place and turn it into a parking lot. There will always be deer there. There's a thicket on one side of the road. There's a pond on the other side of the road. There's certain things in certain places that the deer will always be there, generation after generation. And hunting with so many people for so many years in hunting clubs and stuff, you get to know people year after year, very closely. It's like family. And they start talking to you and telling you. I had a few mentors when I was younger that were killing some really nice deer. And at the time, you could kill a buck a day. When I was younger in Alabama, well, we had a rule for our club: you only kill 5 a year out of the club. Well, I mean, we were killing 70-something bucks a year.
Yeah,
but there was 6,000 acres with 25 members. We had. I mean, back then, man, it was killer. And this one guy, he would never tell anybody anything. Like, he was super secretive, and he killed 5 bucks a year, and they were all big. And he would usually kill 1 or 2 of them with his bow. He was that guy. And it got to where I would go on lunch when everybody else was eating. I'd go scouting. And when everybody else was watching football games, I'd go hunting. And even as a little kid, I mean, I was sitting in a stand all day long when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I was just obsessed with it. So, like, the more I did that, he started taking me with him to go. If he killed a deer, he'd be like, will you come help me get this thing out of the woods? Because you didn't want nobody to know where it was at.
Yeah.
And he'd show me. He'd be like, here's a deer laying. My stand's right there. There's cut over and a cut over, and there's like white oaks right in the middle. These deer bedding, but I can sneak in down this ditch. And he was doing this stuff that I'd never even heard of. I mean, we went and sat in boxes on green fields.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But that kind of information, like I said, for somebody like you, is cool to me to be able to watch Pablo because he's new. So some of the ways he thinks is also beneficial for me because I've forgotten some of that simple, this is what we need to do mentality. I mean, like we went the other day, you put yourself on a doe in a spot we'd not even scouted.
Yeah.
And that's better than I did the day before.
Now, when you talk about these historical areas, historical rubs and all that, what's going to be like the variant to it? Topographical area, food sources, or just travel
all
corridors?
Of it. Every bit of it.
Okay.
You could take every single hunter in Alabama and combine them together, and that's how I hunt. Like, I don't care if a deer's on a saddle, anything. Like, if I find sign, and typically what I'll do, if you take whatever area you're given, because being in hunting clubs, you had a limited space.
Yeah.
Whereas like over here, for instance, I mean, if you've got 100,000, 200,000 acres of land, I mean, you've got every kind of terrain and stuff you can imagine. But if you've got, say you only have 100 acres, well, there's going to be a best spot on 100 acres. That's all you've got to work with.
Yeah.
Well, you may only have a 110-inch deer, maybe the biggest buck you've got on the property. But if you want to find that 110-inch deer, you've got to look at that topography, and you've got to figure out what on this property is that deer going to use. So on 100 acres, you might be able to eliminate 90% of it. Yeah. There may only be a 10-acre area. Like this buck I killed last year, I mean, all I did was it was like, what is the worst terrain on this whole piece of property?
Yep.
And when the season was over, I had been scouting Bankhead the year before because I was like, I'm going to hunt public land first time in my life, and we got over there and got looking, scouted for about 3 or 4 months, went 30-something miles, and finally started hitting. And once we realized what they were doing in that terrain, the season was over last year. I was like, we need to go down to our lease. Like, I've got a spot I want to look at. And we went down there, went up the side of this bluff, and got to the edge of the top of the bluff, and there was a bench. And on that bench, I found about 20 rubs. That some of them were historical, some of them were fresh, which is the best thing I can ever find. Yeah. Nothing's better to me than historical rub line. Like, that's my favorite number one sign. And we went on up to above it because I was thinking if I can get to this next little bench, which wasn't 20, 30 yards straight up the hill, I could get on that next bench and shoot that bench and be up above everything.
Yeah.
Well, when we got to the next bench, it was like scrapes. I mean, everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the way down that everywhere. So then I was intrigued because we'd never been on this whole part of the property. And I was like, what in the world is here? Like, why are there bucks walking? I mean, I know the terrain's horrible, so they're safe. But where are they going and coming from? So we just started walking, and you just hit them historical rubs. There may not be fresh ones, but you're going to find where that buck's traveling.
Yeah.
If you look hard enough and pay attention, you're going to be able to find your way into something. And we found on one end, it goes off into some private property. That guy's got a green field over there and is probably feeding corn and everything else. We wasn't feeding nothing. I don't ever put out bait. So, because it changes deer movement. Like I like to hunt travel corridors. You put out bait, you've turned your travel corridor into a food source, which in turn brings your deer in there at night. So then you bump them out of there trying to get in there in the morning. You know, I want to know where they're bedding and where they're eating, and I kill them in between. Yep. So like we knew where the food was, and so we headed back the other way, and just turns into this nasty, thick mess, probably another 200 or 300 yards away. And basically what I had found was exactly in the middle of those two. So I stuck a camera up there and just left it, just like we did over here on public land. We just left it there all season. When we pulled the card, it was like all the deer from it's about a 14-day period. I had 5 different bucks on camera that were all, between 100 and 130 inches.
Yeah.
They walked right down the same exact spot. Every buck that we had on the property that was a shooter came to that trail. And I'm talking about we have 900 or 800 acres. So, I mean, every buck on 800 acres we had on camera on all of our cameras came to that spot at least once during daylight hours.
I thought something really cool Pablo brought up is, him being so new and starting from scratch, he doesn't pick up any bad habits from it.
No.
And also, like, sometimes, like, I was just telling Shane Parker about this, like, I've gotten so into just trying to find a mature buck and hunt a mature buck. I was sitting there and I was like, how do I even hunt a doe now, You just get so caught up in trying to hunt a buck, you
forget how much fun it is to hunt. And that's why I enjoy hunting and enjoy hunting with Pablo, because for me, it's like Michael Perry always says. He always says he's not a trophy hunter. And he's got the state record muzzleloader buck, but he's also got some other giants.
Yep.
And he's got a lot of big deer. But at the same time, it doesn't bother him a bit to go shoot a 6-point if he wants to shoot a 6-point and get some meat. But that's the fun. That's the difference between a deer hunter and someone who goes hunting.
Yeah.
Like for me, if I couldn't deer hunt, like I had my aorta ruptured 2 years ago, and I had to have heart surgery. Well, I told my wife, I said, as much as I hate to say it, you always think of the stuff you'd regret.
Yeah.
If you knew you were going to die. And the doctor told me I wasn't going to live to the hospital. So they threw me in an ambulance, and all the way there, all I could think of is that was the last time I could do everything. Yeah. And all that was popping into my mind was, I'll never get to go hunting. I'll never get to go fishing again. I just killed my last buck. And I started remembering the last fish I caught, last buck I killed. And I was like, man, like, you don't realize how big a part of you that is.
Yeah.
But when you're faced with death and all you can think of is, I don't get to see my wife again. I don't get to kill a buck again. I don't get to go fishing again.
Yeah.
But really, like, that's the difference between, like, some people are so worried about how big the deer is, what it scores. Matter of fact, I had to stop following all of the pages on social media.
Yeah.
The more I did YouTube with the negative comments, I deal with stuff on YouTube anyway, and that's part of it. But with just the feedback on a lot of the social media sites like Facebook, stuff like that, you get so many people that are so
negative,
and they're just always wanting to say something that goes against what somebody else is saying, that it's not, like, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I like the days of when I was 8 and you see a deer and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a deer.
Yeah.
And I still get that way. It's like when you're sitting there and you hear something, look up and see that brown moving, like, I get fired up, and I want to be able to do that, and I want to be able to enjoy that. Yeah. So if a deer comes through there and it looks like, if it's 100-inch, 90-inch 8-point, and I shoot it thinking it's bigger, and I get over there to it, I don't care. I'm going to mount it and put them on my wall. You know what I mean? Because it was as exciting, as fun as anything. It's just a cool situation.
I went from hunting, hunt club. You got lucky if you seen a deer that day.
Yeah.
To go on a bankhead, so things really haven't changed much at all.
Yeah. See, it was us in Selma. It was like we were seeing like 30 deer a day. Down there, it was like everywhere. Yeah, it was crazy.
Jeez. That's a big change then.
Yeah, it was massive. Which that club closed down when I was in my 20s. So when I came up here, I hunted Wheeler about a year or two, and then went out to Marion County. I was in a club out there for about 10 years.
Gotta beep that part right there.
Yeah. And it was, Marion County has a lot of deer in it. We saw a lot of deer in that club, and it was a lot of fun. But I kind of got to the point, with my taxidermy thing, kind of going into that, doing so many deer from here. Like, I didn't realize that I'd moved down the road from some of the biggest deer that ever lived in Alabama, like where a lot of the records come from. But when I'm mounting deer, even from this area, I have neighbors that are killing 150-inch bucks out of their yard, because it's the same deer. So, I'm sitting there hunting these hunting clubs and paying $1,000, $1,500 a year. And the biggest deer anybody has on camera is a 125, and we're supposed to be under trophy management. And it's like, 125-inch deer is a good deer in Alabama.
I shoot it any day.
No, but I am too. Yeah. I mean, I'm taking it at 115. I don't care. Yeah,
letting that air fly.
That's it. And but at the same time, I'm sitting here mounting buck after buck after buck after buck, and I'm like, "Where did you kill this?" And they're like, "Right down about 3 houses down the road." I'm like, "What?" And then it just kept happening, and the more, because I haven't been doing taxidermy for the public now, but for about 5 years. I did them for myself for a long time with some friends, but when I started doing it for the public, it was like all these locals start bringing me these deer, and they're giants. I was like, man, this is crazy. But there's not a lot of houses up here either, so a lot of the deer, even in people's yards, are 7 years old.
Yeah.
They're killing some old bucks, and I wasn't used to that. When you've got so many, we had a member per 30 acres or something like that in a hunting club. Yeah. So if a deer hits 3.5, he's going to hit the ground. So whatever he is at 3.5, he may be a 125 if you're lucky. And that's the biggest deer killed that year. So, it was neat to be able to kill the biggest deer in the club that year. But when I started seeing the potential of what is out there, I was like, man, I'm really missing out. And I'm not saying I'm old, but after having my heart surgery, it was like I woke up and was like, you know what? Like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I've got a wall full of 120s, like I really want a big deer.
Yep.
And if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to go where there's big deer. And so, once I got to talking to a lot of these guys like Michael Perry and Jamie McKay and a lot of those guys, I'm going to their house and I'm like, what in the world?
Whoa.
It's like, this is crazy. And, it was terrifying having to think about going to public land for the first time, because you have these nightmares of what may or may not happen.
Yep.
And, you're going to run into people. There's going to be people that act like jerks or whatever. But the way I've always hunted, I always hunted pressure, and I always hunted harder than everybody else. So if everybody got up at 5, I got up at 3.
Yeah.
I'd try to beat everybody to the stand when I was in a club, and I'd hunt daylight to dark. So, there was a lot of times where I would kill a buck just because I was there. And that buck might have just got scared off from somebody walking in on him, but I killed him, So I started learning there are opportunities just for being in the woods.
Yeah.
And I notice that a lot in my shop. You see a lot of deer that are injured, stuff like that brought in, where I was telling you earlier, you have a buck that has a broken jaw or a broken nose and a broken eye socket and stuff like that. And I've got one down there now where a guy had told me he had a buck on camera 4 or 5 nights in a row, and it wouldn't ever daylight. And he kept trying to kill him. Well, one day he goes down there and sits, and this buck comes wandering out 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he shoots him. He's like, man, I don't know what happened. He must have smelled a doe or something. Well, the deer looked fine, and I go to cape him out, and he's got a broke nose bone, and his eye socket was cracked, completely busted, where he had gotten in a fight and got busted up and just was either disoriented or got hungry and messed up and come out there at the wrong time. Like, I don't know, but if you're there, you're going to kill more deer than if you're not.
Yep.
And we're trying to figure out what, what their weaknesses are, whether it's they just got in a fight or they didn't smell you.
Yeah. Well, we got 2 different experiences here, so I kind of want to hear both sides of this. So what are kind of like some things you're doing, Pablo, in this early season now that we're in full swing or almost full swing in Alabama, and Daniel, then you can go.
Well, I always have some issues, man, when it comes to scouting, because I was like, what do you do? Do you do before or do you do after? A lot of people, this is kind of like a can of worms, a lot of people will be like, I know you got to do after season scouting because that's the most freshest. And some people will be like, you got to do before season scouting so you can have a better way and kind of like a better pinpoint where to go. I just do both of them. That's what I do. And as now, man, actually we were talking about this. It was yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
My knowledge is still very limited. when it comes to skills like woodsman's and all that stuff. So, man, I didn't know what a red oak was or a white oak or persimmon, none of that stuff. So what I did, I bought myself a book with trees from the southeastern in Alabama. And, man, that's kind of like what I was using just to identify the species and realize, okay, this is a fig tree, this is not, this and that. And also, man, I realized that, a lot of people's not going to agree with what I'm going to say, but trail cameras, the information that you get from trail cameras is pretty much priceless. But for somebody, and this is a specific in my opinion, from somebody like me with a limited knowledge, because I know my limitations, if I rely strictly on technology and cameras, I will not cultivate my skills as a woodsman, as a hunter.
I agree with
So I feel that what I got to do now is just rely on the woods themselves and on the terrain to actually learn. And as I go, as I keep progressing, then I can do and take another step and then start utilizing technology in my favor, But now, man, I feel that I will not gain anything if I just rely on technology, I mean, I could have a deer on camera, but
it's hard to even know where to put it.
Yeah, how do I hunt that deer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, no, I try to do it pretty much like the old ways, the way that it has to be done, which is the right way, and man, something I realized right here, especially with Bankhead, no secret for nobody, that place is tough.
Yeah.
It's
tough if you know what you're doing.
It's a monster of a place. And man, I tell you what, you think that you might know something about it, go out there. Go out there and get your butt kicked.
Yes, right.
And then you walking 2 miles back to the truck about to cry, like you're like, I ain't doing this no more. And
I ain't no good.
Yes, man, I suck at this. I knew it better.
I hate deer.
The only thing,
I'm selling my bow. I'm getting everything.
I'm not even selling. I'm just throwing it off of this bluff right now. It's just getting red over.
Yeah, you just think about that big buck in front of that sign, thinking, man, I can't stop now.
Yep.
So it's been a progression, man, and I feel really lucky. A lot of people has been helping me out. Like I said, Daniel, Mr. Michael, Mr. Tony, Mr. Jamie, Parker. Talk about Mr. Tony, man. I mean, you're welcome. That's one of a kind living room in Alabama.
Yep.
I mean, and not only in Alabama, he's
a legend.
Southeastern.
Yep.
Yes.
It's funny. I showed him that spot I killed that buck at and asked him what he thought, and he told me exactly what he was going to do. But I was like, I think the signs tell me this.
Yeah.
Sure enough, that buck did not do what I thought I was going to do. Exactly what Tony said it was going to do. That's what's funny about
crazy.
that.
Yeah, he knows.
Because, Mr. Michael and Mr. Tony, they have like built-in GPSs on their mind about the place. And that's just scouting, boots on the ground. That's
lots of years.
Yes. That's the thing that you will get from that, And I got people there like, I don't know, you just got to put some cameras out there. You'll be all right. I won't learn anything.
It'll only get you so far.
Yes.
It's funny, the place that Jamie helped me look for that buck at, he scouted 200 yards over from that spot the year before,
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I can have 5 deer down there in my shop, and Jamie's got pictures of 3 of them. Some of them he's got videoed with his phone.
Yeah.
Every time he'll walk in my shop once a week during deer season, he's like, I was hoping that would live. I'm like, you're kidding me. And he's like, no, check it out. He'll have a video. It happens all the time.
Yeah. Mr. Myers, man, it just amazes me, just everything he knows. I mean, if you had a situation, he's been there and he's done it.
Yes. Yeah, man.
So much
so
information.
Beneficial to listen to.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Tony is, he's such a cool, nice guy, just like Mr. Michael, just on cool country boys,
and willing to share what they know.
They're actually,
they enjoy it.
Yeah, enjoying sharing with the younger generations, because this ain't nothing like it. Like I said, dude, I had that dough, but Thursday I was shaking, so I was like, please go away, because I'm fixing to miss, and I didn't feel like wounding an animal.
Yeah.
Now, it would have been good just to kind of like break the ice up and in there and all that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mentally prepared. I felt like.
Well, we need to talk about that hunt anyway. Sitting there talking about how you need to just go hunting regardless of the conditions. That day, Pablo texted me about lunchtime. I was over there hunting. He wanted to know if I wanted to go hunting that afternoon. So he meets me over there. Get out of the truck. And what'd you tell me? First thing you said. You said, man, I made a crucial mistake.
Yeah, I made a crucial mistake. Somehow I grabbed the wrong bean instead of having my early season, I got like the mid-season.
Yeah, the insulation. It's
Yeah.
91 degrees.
Yes.
Oh no.
And Mr. Hunter right here forgets his rangefinder and my headlamp. At first day,
so we get ready to go in. I'm like, well, I mean, it's going to be hot, but at least we don't have too far to go. So he's like, man, I don't have a rangefinder either. I was like, well, here, take mine. Like, I can probably range a little bit better than you or whatever. And well, anyway, we start walking. We're easing up in there, because we're coming up on this place. Should have some oaks in it. And he was like, we're going to go check for acres, see if we can find some sign and get in a tree. So we're easing up in there with our saddles, all quiet, creeping across this ditch. We get in the oak flat. Okay, we're there. Like, we're looking for sign. And all of a sudden, Mr. Hunter here, his phone goes off, and it's the duck hunt sound from Nintendo.
Mario,
it's like it's like a text message.
Yeah.
He goes, "Tit-tit-tit-tit-tit-tit." I'm talking about as loud as the volume would go. And I turned around and looked at him and started laughing. He's like, "Man, I'm so sorry." And he turns it off, and I was just, let's just listen a minute, see if we can hear some acorns. Well, the second we stop listening, Pablo says, "Man, I hadn't heard anything." And right when he says that, he drops his bow. And it's like, it hits all them dry leaves. I said, well, I just heard your bow hit the ground.
I was like, I hope I didn't miss my sight.
But 20 minutes later, we go get in a tree, and he has a doe at 36 yards.
Yep.
And I mean, the way we went in the woods, the wind was blowing this way. We needed the deer. The deer should be coming here. So we're going to get up in here. The deer are going to be coming from this way. Like we had everything perfect. We get in a tree, wind swaps dead wrong, blowing straight back into the thicket.
Yeah.
And still, he almost kills a doe. Why? I don't know. The doe didn't know he was there, never smelled him, should have heard us.
You're not there, you're not going to get a chance.
That's it. I mean, if you can go hunting, go hunting.
It was also early season, so maybe that doe didn't feel pressured.
Yeah. That's it. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe there's people back there all the time walking around.
Now, something funny happened like that one time. I was with Parker, and I'm guilty of, like, sometimes when I get bored, I like to read the news. So I'm laying there, it's like I said, nice and quiet, and it was some news about what happened. It was some kind of fire around my place. So I go ahead and click on it, but I didn't realize the article has a video attached to it.
And
then the volume was up too.
Yeah, and the volume is way up there. So I'm reading, and I don't know where it's like on the local news, and I threw my phone. Just went up, like, and Parker started laughing, and I'm kind of crawling to it, and I was like, dude, I'm sorry. And he was like, man, that was the best thing of the day. Yeah. And
it was kind of like a thing with the buck I shot the other week. The whole time I was just thinking, my butt's sore. I'm on this incline. I'm hot. This mosquito will not leave me alone. And I'm just like, man, I need to go home. And I'm like, no, I ain't going home. I've been here for a reason. I'm just going to stick it out. Bait kill, you'll just have those days you think nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And it happens. You're like, holy crap. So
did you talk to people about it like it was the best day you ever had? It's like, oh man, like I went in there and I did this, and the whole time you're mad and miserable. It's like, it's like, actually, like I was going to leave.
Yeah.
I had no intentions of staying there.
Yeah.
But,
man, that place is.
But going back to what you had asked, like preseason, postseason, like for me, like I do the opposite of what everybody does, I guess. I don't know. Like every time I hear somebody talk about the way that they do stuff, I just kind of barrel off in there. But I like to go in during bow season. I've never had a lot of time to scout for acorns because when I was a meat market manager, we always worked all the time. I didn't have Saturdays off and was off split off days, so it was like you didn't have a lot of time just to go look for food. And at that last minute, if those acorns don't start dropping early, they've backed the season up so much now. I mean, our season opened, September 30th.
Yeah.
So the acorns started dropping the day before, or whatever. So it's like you can't go and scout for acorns anymore. They're dropping, deer season's already open. So you can go in there and look for acorns and try to climb on a food source if you find sign. But I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go in there and walk around for 8 hours and just leave because I didn't find any sign. I will go and look to a point in the afternoon. And if I don't find what I'm looking for, I'll get on a bluff gap or I'll get on a saddle and I'll just hope a deer's traveling, but I want to hunt too.
Yeah.
So what I'll usually do, like my rut spots, I like to keep cameras up all year long and figure out when deer are in certain places. Cause like I said, I'm usually hunting travel corridors. So like, I want to know when they're there during daylight hours. Typically that doesn't have a whole lot to do with bow season. So as long as I know where some of those food sources are, what I'll usually do, like that deer that I busted last week, I went to one of those spots that I knew there were some good deer. And I got in a spot based on where there should be food, based on where the thermals should be right and the wind should be right, based on the topography. And I just went in there blind at 4:30 in the morning, and got in there and climbed in the right topography where I knew a oak flat was, because I knew there's a lot of acorns dropping. And, lo and behold, I told you all that draw that I was sitting in that should have been carrying my thermals down to the bottom actually curved below the hill where I couldn't see it. And that deer came up the draw and got my wind. But I had put myself on a deer that, it might have been a 150-inch buck. I don't know what it was. Could be a fawn, but I'd put myself on a deer sight unseen blind just because I knew there were deer in the area. So in my opinion, if you're going to try to kill a big buck, you kind of need to know where big bucks live. If you can find an area where he'll travel, he's not going to go across 200,000 acres. But he's going to, they'll travel a pretty good way in a low deer population. But at the same time, if he's traveling in an area, he's also bedding in an area and feeding in an area. So it doesn't bother me to bump deer during bow season.
My biggest thing probably is, for me right now, my experience level, if I see that deer cross that road into this place, I'm like, okay, I got you.
Yep.
I know where you're going to be. I'm going to hunt you down. But it's when I go in the area that I do not know that a buck's living there for sure. And I'm looking at the sign. I'm like, well, is he only here a certain time of the year? Is he here right now? And, it's not like most time you're going to jump them up and see them. That usually doesn't happen.
Right.
But when I can see jump one up in there, I'm like, okay, now I got you. Now I want to hunt you down until I get you. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I've noticed is bucks typically travel in a circle. And I used to think of it as a linear thing, like where they would come and they would go, and they would come and they would go, food to bedding. But a couple of the guys that I've hunted with over the years kind of taught me that they make a loop, and it's always that way almost every time. And if you ever notice, like when they came out, because we didn't have game cameras when I was a kid, but once we started putting up game cameras on these places where these guys were talking about these loops, where you'd kill the same buck, whether it was here or here or here. And it was like, I don't know, how do you know that?
Yeah.
But they were finding tracks. They would ride four-wheeler roads. Every time it would rain during the rut, they would just get on the four-wheeler and start riding. They wouldn't go scouting in the woods. They'd look for the tracks crossing the road. And if a big buck crossed the road, it was inevitable. One of my buddies that taught me a lot of this stuff, he'd be like, now watch this. And we would go, 2 miles away down a different road and turn on an intersection and go to another spot. He's like, watch when we pull up right here. He'd pull up to a crossing, and there's big old buck tracks crossing the road. And he could take me to 3 or 4 different roads and show me where that same buck had crossed.
Yep.
And he's like, if you want to hunt him, we'll kill him in the next 2 or 3 days. And every time we'd go sit on those crossings, and I never, ever got a shot. He killed every single one of them. but the thing is like that buck would be on that loop. And when he started making that loop, once he hit that pattern, he would do it every day, and sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. And when I started putting up cameras, I started seeing that. I started, actually visualizing what was happening, because then you start noticing if you've got a crossing here and a crossing here and a crossing here, and you put up 3 cameras, you might have the same buck going the same direction at different times of the day. And then I started noticing, even like over here in the forest, you'll see a buck on camera. Well, 8 hours later, he'll come by the camera again, going the same direction. So like, Lord knows where he was at for 12 hours or 10 or whatever, but he's out looking for does or whatever, and came back by the same way. And the looking at the terrain, it's like, how did he get around? Like, what loop did he make?
Right.
But he made a loop. Somehow he went in a circle.
You see that in early season too? They're making loops, or they more home based?
Yeah. Earlier the season, they almost stay in the same spot. Like, you'll get pictures of deer. If you're getting a buck in velvet on camera, a lot of times he'll be there daily almost.
Yeah.
The hard part about that is the little bit of travel. So it's not real easy to find a bachelor group when you have such a low deer density.
Yeah.
And when you do, you're almost like, with me, I'm wanting to go in there and hunt their travel corridor with a rifle during the rut. Like if you go in there and mess them up, it's like that buck or the deer I bumped the other day, whatever it was. I'll only do that once. It doesn't bother me to go in and bump a deer, but if I've got 4 or 5 places that's got big deer in it, I'll hit each one of them one time early season. And sometimes I'll get lucky and get one of them. But if I bump a deer in those spots, I'll leave it alone till rut. I'm done with it. It's early enough where it'll recover. It ain't no big deal. And the deer just thinks, what's the person doing in here?
Yeah.
But I don't want to mess with it too bad, but at the same time, what I do is when I bump a deer, it's like that when I bumped the other day, what I'm going to do this next year after postseason, because I love postseason scouting. That's my favorite.
Yep.
You've got fresh sign for one thing, so it's easier to see. And when you can find fresh rubs, you might see them 100 yards through the woods. Well, when you find them, if there's historical rubs, then you've got generations of bucks using a trail, and once you establish that travel route, then it will be there from now to the end of time. And you can start making multiple stands on whatever property that you're hunting and actually have the ability to go and hunt specific buck groups as they're coming, or it's actually estrus groups, but you can hunt these different estrus groups during certain dates. So it allows you to pinpoint a specific spot where you should kill a deer in multiple spots.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm sure I'm a little biased by because I killed my first good buck out there in the early season, but it seems where, of course, there's going to be a little part where it starts getting weird when they start to kind of transition out of the early season habits. But it seems like if I can just find one, I can hunt him and I can track him down a little bit better than if you see him in late season, you're like, okay, I think he's here, but he might also not
and
be.
That definitely, early season, you will get, sometimes you'll get pictures of a deer from June until October.
Yep.
Like when they hit a summertime pattern, they're there. That's just where they live, and they've got bedding and food kind of right there. Oh. But now during late season, like rut, all of my pictures is I'll get a picture of the same buck usually 2 times, if very rarely 3 times a year, and it will be this date, and they'll come through there, and there may be 3 or 4 other bucks in those dates, but you may not get another picture of a deer in that spot on that camera the rest of the whole year. And I think that's what a lot of the problems with like with you trying to scout, Pablo, if you decide to put up a camera, you may find great sign and put a camera on it. Well, if you put the camera up in January and the rut was during November in that area, if you put the camera up in January and check it in July, you may not have a deer on camera. And you're thinking, man, this area is not as good as I thought. This sign must be old. Whereas, in fact, it may have giant deer on it for 1 week and back during November.
Yeah.
Now, I got a question for y'all before. It's kind of like a random question. What do you guys think about like urine, like taking a piss in the woods? Some people believe like after 10 minutes.
I've always wanted to test that, and I've never done it.
Now, and the reason why I'm asking this is because last season I was on this WMA. I took a piss about 100 yards from where I was going to climb. And maybe around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, it was like 7 something, and a big old nanny, a big old doe, she was walking up that ridge, and she went straight, and we're talking about, I took that piss maybe 2 hours and a half ago, and she went straight to that stump. It wasn't a stump, it was just where I pissed, put her nose down and raised that tail up. Didn't blow or nothing, just raised that tail up and start walking the other direction. So
I've heard it, just the ammonia and stuff, it just smells like urine. Now, it's like people say, deer don't like something different. So since a deer is a prey animal, if they smell urine that is not prey urine, because a lot of it will smell different, but based on what we eat. We can tell that. Yeah. You can smell that if you eat asparagus or anything else. So it's like if a deer smells something in that urine that does not, because any kind of predator, if it's a coyote, a fox, anything, they don't want to be around that either.
Right.
So that's what's always made me paranoid is I just don't like introducing anything if possible.
Yeah. So
whether they determine if it's a human's piss or not, I don't know, but they definitely, like you said, okay, this is different.
Yeah, like to me it would make more sense. Like I would rather pee out of my stand than do it 100 yards away, because at least then you could shoot something maybe before it busted you.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Pablo, I'm kind of in the middle of it because I think it depends on where you're at. Because I've pissed right in a mock scrape before and get deer hitting it.
I've heard of
like
that.
right then. But I've also taken a piss somewhere in a different area, and it'd be 3 weeks before I even get a deer come through there on camera. Right. Whether that was just because they wouldn't use in that area or not, I can't 100% say. But you just never that test is not 100%. You can't really just base it off of it, but you kind of have some few generalizations that can kind of come off of that.
Right. Well, you have to assume, too, that a deer only knows what they've experienced. They don't assume anything like a person would. At least I wouldn't imagine they would. Like a deer bases what they do every day on what has happened to them in the past. So a 5-year-old buck has figured out more than a 3-year-old buck, and so on and so forth. Oh, yeah. So, like, if you peed in the wood every single day, and the buck come by there every single day since he was a year old, and nothing ever happened to him, then it doesn't matter what it smells like. But if he walked by one pee one time and somebody shot at him, or he ran into a person and scared him half to death, he's going to relate that to that. And it, like, I always think of it like with my dog. Like, we've got a dog that Chrissy's got him next door because he barks all the time. But if you watch your pets, like, I don't know if y'all have inside dogs, but it's very interesting if you're a hunter to watch how a dog reacts to things. And as they get older, like mine's 12 years old, and he does things differently than he did when he was 6 and differently than he did when he was 3. Yeah. But he starts to pick up on things. If he wants food, he goes over and scratches on his bowl. He doesn't scratch on the couch, and you have to assume that a deer has got a similar mannerism. If they learn a certain thing, they just know that thing. Yeah. They don't assume anything. They know that this happened, so they need to adjust and do this. Yeah. And I think the older they get, they have more of that in their catalog, so it depends on how they were affected. It's like what you were saying about being in this mock scrape in this other place. I think it depends on what has happened to that deer in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think, like you're saying, every deer is going to react to it differently. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm hunting a travel corridor like during the rut, I don't really worry about too much stuff. Mm-hmm. But say it's like tomorrow, I'm going where I know this buck's living, I'm not going to do anything to even let him know I was there. Like, if I can walk on a creek bank so he don't smell where I've walked on the ground, I want to do that. Right. Yes. So it's very situational, the way I kind of say it.
Especially in a bedding area, because if they're there close and they're living there, then they don't smell anything. They're there because there is nothing there.
Yeah. So he already knows everything, and if you piss right there, and that gets sent
it's not
him,
his.
He's like, okay, somebody's in here. Well, then now if he goes and investigates it, and you weren't setting up over it, now he's busted you. Now he's got your ground scent where you just walked.
Yep.
And now, even if it's at night, he knows you're there now. Now you're going to come in a different way and hope he hasn't changed his patterns too.
And now for the rest of the season, when he smells something like that, he's already educated for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and they won't even go anywhere. Like, they'll just stand up. When you go in there, they're looking for you. And I think they just, like I said, it's like your dog or anything else. Like if you pull up in the driveway, your dog goes to the window. If a deer hears you come walking down through the woods once he's busted you once, he ain't going to go tearing off through the woods because he'll get shot. He can't go anywhere. He's just going to go off the edge of the hill and watch you or listen to you walk by and get back behind you or whatever he needs to do. But they'll avoid you. Like, once they found you, you're not going to beat them.
That's amazing to me, because a lot of people don't think like, oh, they're just dumb animals and this and that. They're way smarter than what we think. That's what I believe.
Yeah, well,
they're super smart, and you're in their house.
Yes,
I kind of have like a 2-day rule to me. A lot of people, they want to be in there one day and not mess with it again. I have a 2-day rule. I want to go in there, kind of hunt, kind of scout. So then he's going to know, okay, I had a visitor today. That next day I want to kill him. If not, I don't want to go back in there for a while, because that second day he's like, okay, and he's back. Well, if I keep coming, and he's going to be like, okay, I'm being hunted.
Yep.
Versus that second day he's like, okay, that's where I have a visitor again. And then after that, I don't want to be back in there anymore, anytime soon.
Yeah, you don't want to push him to nocturnal or anything.
Well, it's like I told you about that deer I bumped the other day. Like, if I do that early season and I know it's a good area, then I'll give it one chance to see what happens. But then once you've scared them, you want them to think somebody was lost, or somebody accidentally say, "What in the world was that?"
Just a visitor one time.
And you want them to just leave it at that. You know what I mean? It's like you don't want to push it, because if you've found a mature buck, he's there because people are not there. Yeah. And you don't want to be that guy, because sometimes, you can be the person that ruins your own deer hunting.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to a lot of people that shoot smaller bucks because their neighbor is going to kill them anyway. If a buck gets to be 3 years old, he's a nice buck, he hadn't been shot yet, the odds are your neighbor's not going to kill him because he's not seeing him. Yeah. But, if you go ahead and do it because somebody else is going to do it anyway, then the deer's not going to be for, and like I said, you shoot whatever you want to, but at the same time, you can be your own worst enemy in all those situations. You can go in there and try to push too hard, even if you're bumping deer, and try to keep hunting an area. And you might be afraid that somebody else is going to get in there and kill your deer while you're actually teaching the deer not to come around anybody. Yeah. And nobody can kill it, not even you, you know.
While we're still talking about kind of early season, I got something I want to say. Water.
Mm-hmm.
I have a camera that's set up near some water right now.
Oh, man, it's going
I can't believe you know where water is.
Well, there's a small little water hole that I found on some public land up here in North Alabama. And I put it up about a month and a half ago. Wasn't really getting much sun, but as you know, before yesterday at least, this is October 6th for y'all that are listening. Yeah. Before yesterday, before that rain that came through, there's been a drought.
Right.
Pretty much pretty good drought, and I've had 4 or 5. I've sent you the pictures. I've had 4 or 5 different bucks hitting, and half of them were pretty good too.
Yeah. And
I'm like, okay, this drought needs to continue to the beginning of 14th for the beginning of the Zone C.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just think that us as hunters, we kind of miss out on water. We don't think about water sometimes.
Right.
And they got to have water too, just as much as food.
Oh, and then right now that's what we talked about last week when we were trying to figure out where to go, because it was like we just need to throw away all of our plans and we have to find water.
Yeah,
like
I
went Sunday afternoon and all I took was just my saddle and my sticks, and I was like, I'm not going to stop walking until I find water. Mm-hmm. And I got on a ditch that always has water in it, and it didn't have water in it, so I went down to the bottom of the hill into where it drains. And I was hoping to at least find a hole or like a spring or something.
Yeah.
And if I could find an isolated little spring or hole, I was like, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, that'd
right
be
here.
money hole right there.
Well, I walked almost a mile and a half, and it got to be like 4 o'clock, and I found a little crossing where there were some tracks coming across, the dirt ditch. Yeah. I just climbed a tree. I was like, if I don't get in a tree, I'm just going to walk back to the truck. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
There's no water in here.
Yeah.
And it was too hot to just I didn't want to keep walking another hour,
Yeah.
So but it is dry. There's places over there right now that I've never seen dry before.
No, it was like last year. If you could find an acorn, that was the money shot.
Yep.
I mean, if you could find one, and I'm going to tell you something, a lot of people's like, oh, it's going to be a massive crop. Now, mountain oaks, they're everywhere. But I mean, I've been walking up there. We've been walking with binos and all that. And dude, there's some white oaks in here and some red oaks in here holding. Yeah. But it's not like they're loaded.
Yeah, some white oaks are dropping good. And then the next 20 won't be at all.
Yeah, it's not like they're loaded,
Right.
I've been seeing it. One ridge side will be absolutely loaded in the areas I've been. And then it may not be enough for the next 2 ridges.
Yeah.
But that one will be loaded.
Right.
But then you'll have that 2 ridges over, you'll have that one tree.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of noticing that. Well, speaking of what you said, what was kind of what did y'all do last year when we couldn't find any acorns?
I just couldn't see anything. Like we didn't do any good until the peak of the rut is when I started seeing some bucks. But it was weird because I had found all this sign 2 years ago postseason. That was the first time I'd scouted out there. Found all this sign, put cameras on it. I was like, okay, I'm going to get me some deer, So I go in there last year, and early season, I saw a couple of good bucks. And then all of a sudden, everything disappeared. And it was almost like the bucks showed up during those first dates of when they were going to start kind of pre-rutting, realized there was no food, and then left. So they weren't there. Matter of fact, all of the sign, I'm talking about killer sign. I mean, like hundreds of scrapes and rubs that we found in a few different places. There was nothing. Like last year, no deer were in there working those areas. The deer that I did get pictures of, they had come through there like one time, but it was almost like they were nervous, like they wouldn't leave their food. And on the taxidermy end of it, the people, I ask a lot of questions when people bring me deer, and I don't care where they're hunting or what they're doing, but it is interesting to compile the information. And the people, I kept getting that same story of I've been hunting this ridge for 20 years and I ain't never killed a buck this big off of it. And I'm like, well, was there acorns in there? It's like, yeah, man, there's some acorns in there. And I'm like, really? And they just, they've been hunting there their whole life and had always killed deer off these acorns. But last year, it was the only tree on the whole property that was dropping acorns. Yep. And this kept happening, but almost all of them were in creek bottoms. So whereas everybody is hunting the tops of these thermal hubs and these ridge tops and these saddles and all this stuff in the mornings, all these people were killing these giant bucks on creeks at 10 in the morning.
Yep.
And they may have been there getting some water, but the only oaks that were dropping, a lot of them were along those creeks. So it was, the deer had just gone to food. I mean, it was that simple, but as hunters, you try to overthink, and you do so much planning. It's like, I've already got every stand I'm going to sit on all year written down in my calendar and what day I'm going, but what if there's no water? Like what happened last year may not happen this year, and it's that way every year. Yeah. So, if I go in there a time or two and there ain't no deer, I may have to move down to a lower elevation. And the same deer may be there, but they may be 300 yards away, and that don't do you no good, if you're hunting.
No, I think I was on to something last year when I kept trying to find an acorn tree, but I think I spent too long trying to find it instead of just going, okay, there's not really any acorns. Let's go jump on a clear cut.
Right.
And I think I really I wasted too much time there trying to find one.
Well, something that we did postseason last year is we went looking for some browse, kind of like what you were talking about, looking for thickets and looking for places where the sun was shining on ridges and trying to find browse lines where deer, because there's places, I mean, if you've got hundreds of thousands of acres and there's no acorns dropping in a 1,000-acre area where you're trying to find them, then they've got to be eating something.
Yeah, because remember the Mount Laurel that we saw,
and that was last year. Before. Yeah, me and him went into a place postseason, and down the edge of a creek there was mountain laurels. There's mountain laurels everywhere over there. Yeah. Well, we went down this one creek, and I told Pablo, I said, "Look at this," and there was hundreds of mountain laurels down through there. It was just solid, and from nose down, it was bare brown limbs.
I've seen some of that
and from there up, it was solid green leaves.
And I've never seen that before.
It was like they had eaten it like it was turnip greens.
Well, the problem is I had spots like that I knew about. I just didn't jump on it soon enough.
I had never even thought about it. Like, I'd never considered that being. If you had been sitting on that ditch last year when there was no acorns, it was like a food source.
Yeah, and I didn't know that thing, man.
I didn't either.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, I was like, man, there ain't no deer. What's going on? And then when you're driving back home, all the deer on the edge of the road, eating the grass.
Yeah, you're seeing 100 does on the edge of the road eating grass.
I was like, oh, it's some bull crap. Not paying attention. Hey, they're on the road.
Yeah. That's what I was I was like, this is crazy, man. I mean, I'm there, and that's because they were browsing right there. You know, they were hitting that grass. And I was telling Daniel too. It's funny how a buck will react to a truck versus a doe. Because there was does, literally, they looked like they were hijacking. I mean, just trying to jump in the truck. They will not move. And then as soon as I made a ride, it was a big buck.
And tried to hop back in the woods.
Dude, as soon as my lights got him, I mean, he was in the air running already.
I'm not lying to you. I had to change my strategy this year because I was never seeing deer on the side of the road in Bankhead at night.
Right.
I started going faster.
Oh, yeah.
And I started catching the ass end of them, hopping back in the woods.
Before they got going.
Yeah. It's not a safe bet, but it works.
Yes. That's what I got a bigger brush goer.
Yeah. But it's crazy how intelligent how intelligent they are to know to hop in the woods when a truck's coming.
Yeah, it's probably generations. You know?
I mean, they probably got shot at one point on the side of the road and started hopping.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I talk about this. Like, one of the things that really misled me, when I first started. Didn't know nobody. I came across these TV shows on DirecTV. Man, these people killing these giants and all that, and they're just walking right there in the middle of the field. Well, this Midwestern, private property, there is a whitetail paradise where the deer doesn't get pressure until they get about 4.5 years old.
And you have multiple bucks in one area, too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they will not shoot that deer, just pretty much what you said, like that deer is used to the human scent, is used to absolutely everything, but he's never associated that particular scent or whatever it is to danger, Right. So they can actually grow and be giants. And right here, man, on the southeastern button buck, he better watch out,
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen out there. So in my mind, I was like, yeah, man, this is it. And I was doing so many wrong things. Yeah. Like, I went 3 years without seeing a deer.
Yep.
And I was
That's amazing you're still hunting.
Yeah, I was about to defeat myself. I was about to just give it up, and I was like, this is it. Like, man, I'm just not doing this no more and this and that. That's when I met Mr. Tony. Well, I didn't meet him. I just went looking for him because I don't met him years ago. And he was like, no. Hold on. Let's just go back to the drawing board because you're way off the charts. And then I realized, like, now I can see those kind of shows and just appreciate how different style of hunting it is compared with what we do. But as a new hunter, you can get misled and actually it can be toxic for you, you know.
Right.
'Cause you can fall victim of the industry.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
We're about to take us a break real quick, and we'll get right back at it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, guys, we're back from our break. As we're going to start off going into rut. So, how are y'all doing rut, both of y'all? And are y'all just doing pinch points, or y'all going back with historical stuff, or y'all just, what are y'all doing?
Well, I learned this from Daniel, Mr. Michael, Mr. Tony, a little bit from Mr. Jamie. Look for historical. Try to stay where. I mean, of course, look at your pinch points and your gaps. I got this from Shane Parker. He told me a bluff gap is going to be as good as the cover around it. It could be the perfect area, not good at all. And I learned this from Daniel about 3 weeks ago. A lot of times you might have a pretty spot that it has no deer on it, and it might end up just being a pretty spot.
Well, and there's spots that look perfect, even thick spots. Yeah. You know, and the thing is, if you walk, you know, for several hours on a bluff, you will find several bluff gaps where there's holes where deer could travel, but there may not be deer on them. And I've even found gaps that had historical sign on them that didn't have anything fresh on it, and put cameras on it and didn't get any deer on those cameras either. Now, there may be deer there a different year, or there might have been one buck there 1 year or whatever, but for me, typically it's like travel routes rather than during the rut. I don't focus on usually like food to bed or food to water. It's more traveling like area to area. Like say you've got, like everybody's hunting a thermal hub and everybody's hunting this thermal hub. For me, that spot's going to be what connects those thermal hubs.
Yeah.
You know, it's spots that where people go in there, those bucks can get away, and also where they've been in the past where they know they're safe. Because they're going to travel looking for does. I mean, even if there's people in the woods. So wherever they can do that safely.
Yeah.
I got one spot that kind of sets up what you're talking about. It has there's a bluff gap coming off a ridge that people always go in there and hunt. I don't really know why they do, but they do. Well, a lot of those deer will funnel down and go to creek crossing, and then they'll go up to another bluff gap to get away from the pressure to a thicket.
Right.
Well, that same bluff gap on the other side also wraps to a bench that they'll travel coming from a different area completely. Right. So I got two areas kind of funneling into one.
Right.
And
that's key during the rut. Yeah, anywhere you can find some kind of an intersection. And the more you walk, like for me, if I don't really like looking for certain kinds of topography to go and scout for hours. Like I'll use topography to find where the deer should be, where you can start with your sign.
Yep.
But if you can ever find those trails of historical sign, like those old rubs and stuff, I mean, inevitably there will be a buck use that more than likely in the future, whether it's this year or 10 years from now.
Yeah. Now, now that you're saying that, something that I have realized now that we've been scouting, once that we hit that, I guess, sweet spot in altitude, that's when you start seeing rubs.
Right, and it depends on like
rub, you know. So
yeah, the different variations and the different what do you call it?
I don't know.
On your topography anyway.
Yeah,
like
different elevation.
Elevation. Yeah, I couldn't think of the word. He said something about latitude or something.
Yeah.
These big words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm a taxidermist.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, the different elevation, like it changes a lot, and it depends on even what kind of topography you're in or what piece of land you're on. But you will find specific elevation lines in your particular area you're scouting where the deer put down all the sign. And typically, I think that's going to be that thermal line that they're using. And we just don't know it. You can't tell it or feel it, but on average, it's probably the most average spot they can smell the best. Mm-hmm. And that's basically how I pick my spots. Like it could be at 200 feet or it may be at 1,000 feet. And it's different in every place you go scout. Yep. But when you find an old rub, for instance, you can go, like let's say that you find some kind of hub or whatever, and you go to scout it. Well, if you find one rub at an elevation, then go check that elevation in that area. And before you go try to scout, it's like I was telling you, if you've got a gate that's got 1,000 acres behind it, you can't just go around walking around in circles for a month and try to find sign, because it's very easy. It's like I told you that the first place you ever took me, we went in there and you were kind of disappointed at what we found. You were like, man, I've been trying to hunt this and I can't really find where the deer are. And the thing is when you've got a lot of land like that, if you try to make yourself just hunt this 100 acres or 1,000 acres, you might find the best place on that 1,000 acres, and it may be the worst place on the entire forest.
Yeah.
So it doesn't do you, if you don't find the sign. That's what I was telling you. If we go to this spot, because we found like a little rub at a certain elevation, whatever, and I was like, we're going to walk this elevation line. And if we don't find anything when we get to this spot in this terrain, we're leaving.
We're leaving. We ain't coming back.
Yeah. And we walked in there and didn't find anything. And I told him, I said, I would never go back to this spot ever.
And I was heartbroken, man. And I said this with no shame. We go back to the point where how hard it is, and especially for somebody with me with no background. Dude, no shame. I have cried. Like, seriously, after days of all day sits and walking and scouting. And I guess it was the frustration of not knowing what I got to look for. Like, I honestly have put all my knowledge and all my tools, and I have no results to show for it.
And it's an infinite amount of property. You know what I mean? It's like it could take you a lifetime and not ever find it unless you
never. Yeah.
You can scout 5 ridges out there, and there's not a buck on either one of them.
Right.
There never is throughout the year. I mean, it's just.
And like I said, to me, that's where it comes in. Like if you try to pay too much attention to wind and thermals and all that, what it will do is it will handicap you from being able to bump a deer.
Yeah.
And that sounds stupid, but it's a lot easier to scare a deer and have it blow at you than it is to see it. So if I go and sit on a spot during bow season where I'm not worried about messing the spot up because it's 3 months before rut, I can go in there and burn a spot for a minute if I need to. Yeah. But if I go in there and just take a chance, and I'm like, a buck might walk through here because there's acorns, or got a trail, whatever. If I go in there and sit, well, if I bump a deer and it blows at me, I can pinpoint that deer if it's 200 yards away.
Yeah.
Whereas you have no idea it's there otherwise. So, I mean, all your guessing and scouting, you don't have to put boots to the ground to know where that deer was.
Yeah.
So you can go over there then and figure out why it was there, see what's going on, and then leave a place alone.
Now, you bump a buck as you're hunting. What would you do, like, right there in that moment?
I'd go downwind.
Yeah, that's it. If I'm hunting and I bump a buck and he goes off, all I'm going to do is turn straight downwind and I'm going to try to get back there 100, 200 yards and find the best piece of terrain where he's going to try to circle back on me.
Pick you back up.
Yeah.
There is a possible chance he's going to try to get downwind and figure out where you are. Even if he knows exactly what you are, if he sees you, he's going to try to make sure. Like, imagine if you're in the military and you're in the middle of the jungle, if you can't keep your eyes on your enemy, there's a very good chance you're going to die.
Yeah.
So you have got to know where they're at, even if they're dangerous. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what an older buck does. I don't think they run off and hide. I think they watch you the entire time you're in the woods. That's why when you get in those spots, I think that if you don't see a deer and he's there, he probably is watching you and knows you're there.
Yep. I'll tell you this. I learned that the hard way. I jumped this buck and the wind was straight in my face, right? Jumped him. He runs around the hillside. Well, I keep going where he went, trying to find him. Probably not. 40 minutes later, it was a buck blowing at me straight downwind.
Right.
And I'm over here trying to find him this blow down. He does circle, went back down a draw right behind me, and he sniffed me out.
Right.
Couldn't see him. Couldn't see it was a buck, but I mean, you just know it's a buck when it blows like that.
Yep.
You know?
This other property, this happened recently. I told Daniel, I was in a kayak because the water is usually really low, but that day was pretty high. So I got walk a little bit on the SMC area. Man, big old buck poop. I mean, turds. We're talking about good stuff and fresh.
Yeah.
Jump back again in the kayak. Now, 2 years before that, I remember bumping a buck. And it was a good buck, but it wasn't like a giant. So I jumped in the kayak. I wasn't even pedaling. I was just like literally drifting on the water. And man, an explosion goes on the lily pads on the cattails. I thought that it was a gator, like, to be honest. And it was a big buck. He was better like I was maybe 10 feet from him. I never saw him. He let me get that close to him.
Yep.
And then he blew up. He was better on the water, maybe because of the heat of the day or something like that. He took off running. So then I'm trying to pull up my phone right here, going like that. Next thing you know, I'm on the water. I rode the kayak, So I'm fumbling, roll my kayak and jump back on it. And he's standing on the SMC looking at me. And dude, that's a big buck. I bet you he was thinking like, I don't have to worry about him.
Just standing there laughing at you.
He's just like, don't have to, no worries with him, Man, I pulled my phone and the screen is wet, so I wasn't able to take a video, but it was amazing for me that he was on the water, like literally in the water, and then I started thinking about it and I was like, well, he's completely covered in the back because he knows like the water's going to get low. That place is a mud hole.
Yeah.
You cannot walk in there. So he knows nothing's going to get to him on the back and he can go either way whenever he feels like it's a threat, so.
Right.
Well, a lot of times too, that I've noticed is talking to Wes Moy, and that buck was following that driver right behind him. I wouldn't doubt if sometimes a buck smells you and he just kind of goes the other way. And sometimes if they don't they get right behind you and keep that wind.
Well, I think that's exactly what they do. I think that they stay with you to know where you are to make sure they know how to react. Yeah. Because if they lose you, then they're in danger.
Yeah, they're like
two of the bucks that I killed. I had a lease back here. The first time I ever figured out the dates how precise it was when does go into estrus. I found a tree back here where I ended up killing a little 8-point, and we had hunted that lease. The first year we got it, we hunted it all deer season. Didn't have anywhere else to go, and had put cameras up, and didn't get a picture of a deer at all until the first week of December. And I was like, man, this is weird because I was used to a late January rut. Yep. Well, we didn't take off work. We just was planning on hunting the end of January for the rut. Of course, it was long gone, by the time January got here. But the following year, after getting some of those pictures, I was like, man, maybe we ought to hunt here during these days. So started doing that. And I hunted it 6 years. In 6 years, I killed 8 bucks. And 7 of them were out of the same tree. And 5 of them were on the same exact day. And I was taking off 7 days. Every year I'd take a week's vacation and was still killing a buck on that same day. Like it was so precise, which a lady gets pregnant, the doctor tells her, this is the date you're going to be due 9 months from now.
Yeah.
So, when a doe, it's no different. Like, the way that those cycles work, like it may not be the exact date every single year all the time, but it is so close that you can, literally predict when that deer should be there, for that rut.
Yeah.
And that was pretty interesting over here, but it was weird to see all those bucks show up from nowhere. You didn't have pictures of them at all, and then all of a sudden they all show up. But what I was saying, 2 of the deer that I did kill, there was a white, what they call Great Pyrenees, those big white dogs?
Yeah.
One of the neighbors had one of them, and he used to come over there from time to time. He never really messed with nothing, but you just see him walking down one of the four-wheeler roads, or whatever. Well, the morning that I killed that first buck over there, I was sitting there, and all it was a creek crossing. You could just see mud where deer had crossed the creek. There was no sign in there, but it was the first year I'd hunted it, and I was like, well, here's deer crossing. So anyway, that dog came walking down out of a pine thicket and walked down there and crossed that ditch. And what's funny is I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder if that's a dog crossing. Like, I wonder if that dog has crossed there so many times. It wasn't 10 minutes later, that 8-point come off the hill with his nose to the ground, watching. And he'd smelled and looked, smelled. He was following that dog. And, of course, the dog was gone, by that time. And I shot that buck and killed him. And the following year, I did it again. That white dog come through there. And it was funny because when I saw that dog, I was like, I wonder if he's got a buck following him. And I got my gun and set it up on my stand. And that tall 7-point up there come walking in about 15 minutes later from the same direction, following the same dog.
It's crazy. You think of dogs.
And I was sitting there thinking, they're behind me the whole time walking in here. You know what I mean? So from then on, it was like, the bucks are close. Like, don't ever think that you can't find them. They've already found you. If you've got a camera up, you're going into a place the same way every time, and you're getting pictures of a buck every time you're not there, he's already patterned you. You have to change.
Yeah. Well, something really weird I heard the other day on I like Dan Infault's stuff a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was listening to his stuff, and he said, to hunt hill country, which is kind of like what we hunt, you got to kind of be a master at all. You got to do swamps, the flats, whatever else is, there is.
Right.
You got to kind of know all of it because it kind of all pertains to what we hunt.
Mm-hmm. Well, within several hundred yards, usually you've got some of all of it.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't even realize it's there until you shoot a buck and have to go trail it through some of that stuff. And it's like, man, because that buck's going to go where he thinks he's safe. Yeah. And all of a sudden you come across something that's like, I never would have scouted here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what kind of buck are you after? You don't know.
Right.
No, he has, Dan Info has a quota that I didn't understand at first. He's like the fat chick spot,
Yeah.
I was
Right.
like, what is he talking about, And then, man, I related to him like right away. There's an area where the parking lot is 100 yards from this 5-acre thicket.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I mean, dude, it looks like a sidewalks where the deer's been going in and out. So I remember that day I told Jacob and Andrew about this. I was walking out because it was a thunderstorm and a bad one. I didn't want to get caught up. So I was walking out. It was already foggy and all that stuff. Then I seen what I thought it was a donkey coming out of that thicket. Now, there's some farm animals around there. And so I was like, dang it. Dude, I don't want to get chased by it. I don't really feel like getting chased by a donkey.
That's why I like hunting with you, because you would assume that it was a donkey.
Yeah, I was like, dang it, man.
You ever see that meme at the beginning of the year? You got the donkey laying down, and you
right.
get the bow across it. That's going to be Pablo.
Yeah, so, and it's about 100 yards. So I'm like, dang it, man. That thing is going to chase me. I got my gear. I'm going to have to drop this. I'm going to have to take off until finally, I give him a run for his money,
Right.
But I was like, I don't really feel like doing that right now. I want to get out of the rain. So I jump in the thicket area. I just keep picking. Next thing I know, dude, there's a big buck. And he's walking in the middle of the gravel road. Like, he didn't care about nobody, about anything.
Yeah.
And I didn't have my rangefinder, and apparently I'm not a laser eyes kind of guy. So, I just went like, that's about 30. And man, that thing was probably like 12 yards when I took the shot, and I thought it was 30, so he went like 4 feet high on his back. And then he jumped right back in that thicket. So I was like, dude, I bet you he's been here for days, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Watching everybody in and out.
Probably for years.
Yes, in and out, in and out. And then he's like, okay, that's the last one. Now I can go out.
Yeah.
And then me walking out, I was walking out about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the evening. He probably was not expecting nobody walking out that early. It's like they got a pattern. They go in the morning, they go out late in the evening. So
that's like what he was saying.
Well, that
change it up.
Yep, they do. That buck right there. A guy down in Monroe County invited me to come hunt his farm. He had a 350-acre farm, had some cows and stuff on it, and we went down there, and he was telling me he wanted to go put me in this box on the side of this pasture. And I was like, okay, because I'd never been there. It'll be fun to go down there and hunt.
Yeah.
We were going for one day, just go down there and hunt a day. And he told me, he said, what time y'all want to go out in the morning? He says, full moon. And like with me, I'll go early. I don't care what the moon is. I don't care. I want to be in the woods when a deer don't know what I am, and I want to leave when a deer don't know what I am.
Yeah.
That's just me. If it's legal shooting light, I want to be hunting. Well, he was like, I'll just go by and get us breakfast, and we'll eat and get on out about 7 o'clock. And I was like, okay, it's his place, whatever he wants to. I don't want to make him uncomfortable. So we get up and eat. Of course, we're eating sausage, biscuits, and stuff. And I'm like, man, we're going to stink. But anyway, I'm going to be in a box. So I'm like, it'll be fine. So we get in the truck, and driving down the driveway, like 6 does cross the road, and like a 4 points behind them chasing. This peak of the rut, I'm like, oh no, they're already chasing deer. So he pulls up this cow pasture and opens the gate, and we started down the edge of this fence line, and this box is sitting on this other fence line, looking over both pastures. Well, there's no food plot. It's like a pasture with cows in it, and then the ladder goes into a box that's overlooking another pasture that's just sage grass. And I was like, man, and I can see the paved road. You know what I mean? It's 150, 200 yards away. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere, but I'm like, well, okay. And he said, I can tell by the look on your face. He said, you're not real impressed. He said, but I want to tell you something. He said, I've got a picture of a giant buck in here. He said, he's real tall. He said, he's narrow, but he's real tall. He said, I've been hunting him about 2 weeks, and I have not seen him. He said, but I've seen him 3 different times during daylight out here checking my cows. And I said, what time you normally check your cows? And he said, usually about 8 o'clock, something like that. Well, it was about 7:15, 7:30. And I said, well, why don't you just go, where do you usually check your cows? He said, well, I usually drive down the fence line, go through here, and there's a gap right there. And it literally drives by next to the ladder of the box, goes through the other pasture. I said, well, do me a favor. I said, why don't you just drive me over there and just drop me off on the ladder and just go through the fence and drive around the other side of the pasture and let yourself out. He said, all right. He said, you think he's going to just be watching me? I said, well, I mean, if you're seeing him, like, he knows what you're doing and you're just a guy checking the cows. I said, so at least he wouldn't know I was in here. So he drives through there, stops. I jump out, go up the ladder, and he leaves. Well, I watched him drive down through there. I loaded my rifle and set it against the side of the thing, took my orange hat off, put on my camouflage, and pulled my phone out and set it beside me. And I heard him opening the gate on the other side of that pasture, and it's 200 yards across there, and I'm sitting there looking at him. Well, I just turned and looked, and that buck was 40 yards in front of me, walking across the middle of that sage grass. And when I saw him, I was like, there's a donkey. You know what I mean? It was like, there's no way that's a buck. You know, I just turned around and looked, and I was like, oh, no. So I would grab my rifle and shoot him and kill him. But when I shot, this guy takes off. Like, he thought I had done, like, fell out of my box or something. Yeah. So he's jumping like terrace rows. You know, he's flying across this pasture and comes flying up to the box and jumps. He's like, man, are you okay? I said, yeah. He said, did you not shoot? I said, yeah, I just killed a friggin' monster. And he was like, what? I said, yeah. He said, big tall deer? I said, yeah, big tall buck. And he was like, are you serious? I said, yeah. I said, when you drove through there and went to that gate, all he did was turn around, look, and walk right across the pasture. But that guy was telling you that looks for tracks crossing the road. It was the same exact thing. Like, he would find those tracks and then find the trails leaving the road, and he would go hang climbers on those trails. And he would never hunt until the buck tracks started showing up. He would go and check roads, and he'd go back to his camper and watch TV. And it would usually be within about a 5-day period when that rut would kick off, and he'd go take off work a few days and just stay in the camper, and he would start driving it. When he'd find a big set of buck tracks, he'd go get in his climber. And it would be, I mean, he'd find the buck tracks at 8 o'clock in the morning. He'd go park a side-by-side, get in his climber. Well, at 11, 12, 1 o'clock, whenever it was, he'd kill that buck. I mean, it happened. He'd kill 3 a year, every year, and was always the 3 biggest deer killed in our club. And he hunted literally 4, 5, 6 days. You know what I mean? Yep. But he knew the deer physically had been standing there and knew it would come back around that loop. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know? And the thing is, he said, you don't know how many times you'll hear a truck coming and it will go down one of those roads. He said, I'd get my gun ready. He said, because it's almost like the bucks, they know when everybody's coming in and out. He said, and it's like the second the truck goes by, they all just cross the road because they know the truck's gone. It's almost like they won't cross it until a car comes, and then they all cross behind it, almost like it's the danger they knew was coming left.
I've noticed that too. Is we were at a hunt club in this little parking spot where everybody kind of parks, before they get foilers and go out.
Right.
We were sitting there, and we went in later because it was raining real bad, but sitting there eating breakfast, look up in a truck down this gravel road, and you see those start popping out about 6:30. I mean, it's like, what are we doing hunting them way over here, and they're right there popping out. Yep. But it's probably because, everybody's in the woods hunting. They're not right there by the gate.
Right. So, exactly.
Now, do y'all, like, full rut, everybody's report, everybody says, man, they're chasing hard. Do you guys go ahead and do, like, some blind rattling, calling?
I do. A lot.
I actually grunted when I killed that buck.
Yeah.
I did some grunting because I thought I was onto that bigger one, and there's already fresh rubs there. Right. So I was wanting to kind of piss him off, thinking another buck's moved into his area, trying to take it over. Whether that would work or not, I don't know. But that was kind of my plan. I just did like a little light grunt every now and then. Like whenever I had to move because of the wind, I do when I kind of hit the ground, sit down.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that had anything to do with that deer coming in, but it could be why he went down there and started rubbing a tree and then worked his way up to me too.
Well, we've watched a lot of deer in Selma. There were so many deer down there that finally they gave us 125 doe tags a year, and we filled those for 10, 15 years every year.
Geez.
I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot of deer, and I mean, we were killing 70 bucks a year.
Wow.
So like we got to watch a lot of deer. So I mean, there may be 10 does out on a field and 4 bucks, that were out there for 3 hours, and it was really like educational listening to their vocalizations because they make a lot more noises than you think they do. Does, they'll get to jumping at each other and kicking at each other, and every once in a while want to blow at the other one. You know what I mean? And it won't be like a bunch of blowing like you got scared or they scared of you. It's more like a blowing noise, almost like a snort wheeze, But then you'd hear the bucks doing these low grunts. And I mean, this may be during bow season.
That's what he did. He was doing like a little, just a...
Map, map, Man.
It wasn't been that. It was more just like kind of like an internal kind of just
almost like a heavy breathing. But it was nasal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that almost like a tending grunt. Sort of.
Yeah.
Well, they did that a lot, and the more I heard that, the more I called, and then the more I called, the more I started calling bucks in, and it wasn't always shooters, but it was really surprising. Like there's a big, huge ravine over here down the road. It was one of the first places I killed. As a matter of fact, the buck right up here, it was the first buck I killed over there, and I was off in a hole that was two creeks that came together, and I could see these three big ridges that came down and just made a big. It was kind of like a big hub, but it was two creeks, and there was a creek crossing that was, I mean, it was this deep in the earth. Like it'd been there for years. And there was no sign in there really, but it was just like, I don't know where else to hunt, So I got down in there and I started grunting. And one morning I called, I think it was 6 different bucks that I grunted in that morning. Every one of them were like spikes and 4 points. And then finally that one come off the hill. And what they were doing, they were all way up above me, which is one reason why, like I said, I never mess with thermals or anything, because I'm always hunting such weird terrain that you can't beat them anyway. You're in a place where you're like not supposed to hunt. It's like there's no way I can beat the wind in here, but this is where the deer are, so I'm going to try it. But there were these pine thickets on the ridges, and they were like 150 yards up from me, way up there, and it was steep. And I was just in the hole. And every one of those bucks, you'd hear them breaking limbs, and they'd come out to the edge of them trees and walk the edge of those pines looking down in there. And I could have killed any one of them, from where I was at. But it was almost like they were far enough away to even if they did smell me, they were still safe and had their thick cover. Yeah. But I had the advantage with a rifle, Yeah. And that buck did the same thing. He just finally was a big enough shooter, for me to shoot. But after hearing so many vocalizations when I was younger, it gave me that confidence to just start calling when I was younger. And then I started calling in deer. So now, like if I don't have my calls, it's like I don't have my rifle.
I will say this though. On the buck I killed, the reason that I did call for sure is because how the wind was set up. If he did come behind me, he'd be close enough where I'd hear him, or I could still sling a shot over there.
Right.
If he did get behind me.
Right.
But like tomorrow where I'm going, I don't think I'm going to just because I don't know exactly where he's at. And he's and where I'm going to be at, he could easily get downwind of me very quickly.
It would be tough to call. I usually don't call at all during bow season, just because they're going to try to get downwind.
Yep.
And
I would say if you're going to call them like bow season or rut, really try to make it to where if they get downwind, you can see.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, because, I talk a lot with Chains and Haynes, good friends of mine too, and I work with Chase. So I'm always asking Chase, man, all the time. And Chase and Haynes, they're first off, they're like I said, they're friends, so it makes it even better. But I mean, they started pretty much like out of nothing.
Yeah, I think highly of those guys, man. They've really they came up.
Yes, And Chase, I don't want to spoil it, but I'm probably going to. But he has shown me some pictures, man, of some.
Well,
stuff,
they always. I mean, since I first met them, they always have pictures of big deer. But they're the night that they brought all their deer over, because I mounted all of those deer for them, and it was the same few weeks when Michael Perry killed his during muzzleloader season. So Michael brought his rack the night that Haynes and Chase brought all theirs to the shop. And we got pictures of all of them standing there with all those racks in their hand, And that was the night I decided I would never get in another hunting club. That was the night. I told them then, I said, I'm never, ever joining a club again. Like, this is what I want to do.
Man, and we just talk about me racking up and stacking them spikes, And Mr. Michael don't tell me, who knows for how long, don't shoot the first one. Don't shoot the first one. And I'm always like, And, on that muzzleloader record, he said, man, I got a smaller buck going by. And about 100 yards behind him, that's what the record was walking by.
Yeah, well, but that happens a lot. It's kind of like those satellite bulls with elk. That's almost like they send out, they'll send out their little minions.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead, buddy. Keep an eye on them and see what happens to them.
This one wasn't a fully mature buck by any means, but one thing I did think was kind of odd, there was not another deer in that area or a sign of another one.
Right.
I thought it was just that the big one I seen on the side of the road was in there. That's it.
Right.
And this younger buck was in there. And I'm not going to say that I don't think that the bigger one's in there just because that younger one was rubbing that tree.
Right.
But I don't know if the bigger one wasn't behind the younger one too.
Well, that's possible.
Yeah,
I mean, he could have been. He could have
So-
been looking at him. I mean, because in a low deer population, I mean, a bachelor group may only be 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or there may be 1. I mean, there may
Yeah.
not be a bachelor group.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you walk upon this area, blow up with signs, scrapes, rubs, you name it. I'm guilty of getting blind by the sign as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of like I start fumbling. What do I do now? How can I position myself according to this? Because I know if I sit right here, I'm going to be busted. What do you guys do? Like, of course, there's going to be a bunch of variables, such as gaps.
Well, a
terrains,
good
wind.
example is like me and you postseason when you wanted me to show. Well, I went in there with you to get a camera where we had to cross that creek.
Did we have them 2 bugs behind them, or because it was crazy? We were picking up a camera. What was that? Like April?
That was we saw those 2
Yeah,
bucks.
and
These
it
were
was
different.
On Bankhead, 2 bugs like on April, small basket bugs. I would have shot either one of them,
Yeah.
But man, they're still holding on April. Daniel and I were walking down the ridge,
We went and got a camera and we're
Yeah.
coming back out and
And-
walked up on them
and they're just right there, man. Like they were following
between us and the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, like downwind. It was almost like they had winded us. And I don't know if it was because it was so late postseason, but they were downwind. And it was like they had winded us and was trying to figure out what we were doing or where we were. But they just walked in there and were looking at us. It was like,
Just highly
this
curious.
is weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, deer, and he has horns,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah.
what?
Because when they're looking for sheds, I was like, well,
Yeah.
no wonder we ain't finding no sheds.
Well, I
But
didn't
that-
know.
The spot at the end of that road, though,
Yeah.
where we went and pulled your camera, we had to cross that creek. You had found all that sign, but then your camera was 300 yards away from it.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you put the camera, because you're not going to scare the deer. I mean, deer don't like cameras necessarily, but I haven't really had any trouble getting pictures of big bucks with a camera. Now, once I do establish that that's a big buck area, I'll never put a camera in it again.
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily hunting one deer either. When I find where mature bucks will live, I just hunt that spot every year, those dates, and there will always be a big buck there every year or so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From now on out, I want to try to capitalize when I see that one buck in the area and try to hunt them down, kind of like how I did that one.
Right.
Just because it's more simple for me.
Yeah, right.
Plus, they're
But
not
you
really,
have a limited time, too.
yeah, and they're not really in
Yeah.
that big of an area. And if you blow them out of there, fine. Rut's fixed. Don't
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
That's it. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it because too, this time of year, well, I mean, when the season opened October 15th, the deer would leave that area about the time bow season opened.
Yep.
So, I mean, from the end of September to mid-October, if you found a buck, you better try to kill him because he's leaving.
Now,
You're
what
probably not
would
going
you
to see him.
do? Like you walk upon this area, like I said, tore up with sign. Do you stop dead on your tracks and try to circle around, see where it might be coming in and going out, or do you cut right through the middle of it?
If it's early season
Yeah.
and I've got my bow with me in a saddle, it's like when I went the other day Sunday, I walked in looking for that water. If I
Mhm.
walked up on a fresh scrape, I'd climb a tree. I wouldn't walk another step.
It's funny. The spot I was at where I killed this buck, it was on a private property boundary. So I walked that whole line, kind of like I would in a hunt club, on like a SMZ or whatever,
Right.
or like pines to hardwoods kind of transition. And I walked that whole thing, and the main amount of sign and fresh rubs I was seeing was right here. And I said, okay, well, there's a scrape down there, but there's no reason for him to bed over there.
Right.
I thought he was bedded to the left of me in the pines. It was like a little SMZ, but he was really straight or to my right around the ridge on the oak flat. That's where he was feeding. I was hearing him coughing.
Right.
But that's where all the sign was. And I talked to Haynes, and I talked to Shane Parker, Tony Myers, and I asked them all. And, Tony said what he think he was doing, but I was still being me trying to figure out what I was doing. And then Haynes said, stick to that hard edge. That's going to be your best bet.
Right.
And sure enough, he came down the hill around the bottom, straight up to that hard edge.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the sign you see, it will kind of dictate how I decide to set up on it.
Yeah,
see-
because you
yeah.
can, like you said, you get those lines. You find a line of sign or a circle. Like I'll usually turn it into a loop. Like what I'll do is I'll mark like now that you got hunt standing on X. It ain't like using old topography maps anymore. That's great because you can walk through there, and if I see a rub that big, I'm marking it. I'll pin it and pin it and pin it. And remember I showed you, I was like, now that we're done scouting, look at your map, and you start to make an oval or a circle out of all those pins. So then you can fill in the rest of the circle. It's like that buck is coming through here somewhere.
Or you see like the terrain, how he's using it or whatever.
Exactly. You can see on the topography, you can see the elevation, you can see all of that. So instead of paying so much attention to the map itself, just look at where he's going and then walk that line and find where you can ambush him.
Yeah, find a thicket that's near that circle.
Yeah,
find
that spot where that trail may come through the middle of wide open hardwoods.
Yeah.
And let's say he's there at night, maybe, or whatever. But there's going to come a place, especially during the rut, if he's walking that line during daylight, there will come a place to where he's got where he can't go one way and can't go the other way, where it's going to pinch point between something, whether it's a bunch of blow down trees or something, but he's traveling.
Yeah.
And you can get him pinched right there to where your wind won't matter. Like you can get on top of him and the wind's going to be crossing that trail rather than getting in those big areas where you got swirling winds and stuff.
Yeah.
You're almost better on the side of a hill in between spots. That's where you can kill them.
And at some point that deer is going to be daylight. I don't believe that a deer is 100% nocturnal.
Never.
I mean, it's just
during the rut,
especially during the rut.
Yeah, during the rut. I mean, I've gotten so many pictures of, like I said, the same deer coming by the same camera from the same direction.
Yep.
And that was what really started like opening my eyes to how they traveled, because I would expect them to go this way at 8 in the morning and this way at 4 in the afternoon. But it was like 8 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, and then like 11 at night. I'm like, where is he going? So what I started doing is just following the trail where I didn't want to hunt, and I'd go off down in there and then put up a camera 300-400 yards away, and he would show up on there going the same way, and pretty soon I just started pinning sign instead of putting up cameras. I was like, this is not a bunch of different deer, because I mean, as a earlier hunter, you go off a ridge and you find a rub and a scrape, and it's like there's a buck that lives here. It's kind of like in a hunting club. If you find a scrape on the edge of a green field, a buck lives on that green field.
Yep.
And then you go to a different green field and there's a scrape and you're like, oh, a buck lives on this green field too. You don't think about the fact that the green fields are only 100 yards apart and it's the same deer, or 5 different deer on the same scrapes. But what I began to realize was that those deer, everybody's hunting the same deer.
Yeah.
It just depends on when it's coming by you or when it's on that, but it's on that loop, so once you start hunting loops, like that's a great way to wolf pack deer, even if you're not using escape routes. That's what I was talking to you about, like during the rut, there are places where we can go and set up on 2 spots on those loops.
Yeah.
And one of us is going to see a buck.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to come down that trail. You just don't know where they're going to be on the trail while you're there.
Now, something else that is still a little bit kind of like overwhelming for me. Now, I want to see your opinion on this. Overhead and underfoot. Moon, Some people don't really relate that much to it.
I don't care.
I'll use a full moon. I use a full moon to get out there and ride around and look for deer.
Yeah.
But as far as hunting, I don't. There's just too much other stuff that I need to pay attention to than that,
Right. If I've killed 5 deer on December the 4th off the same tree, you could go back and I promise you the moon's not the same on those.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like I like for me and my camera footage over the years, when those does go into estrus, it's going to be a 3 to 5 day period of time in that family of does. And for years and years and years, it seems like it stays the same. It's almost like it's hereditary, like genetically, they just go into estrus that same week.
Yep.
And people will say, like on a hunting club property, they'll say, our rut is Christmas week. And it's like, okay. So, you go back there and get to studying books and stuff, and it's like, well, I mean, there's a bunch of bucks killed this week too. And you start looking at where they were killed, and it's like, that area right there must have a hot doe in it during this time, because it's not like all the bucks just showing up. 5 good bucks are getting shot over a period of 5 years on this one green field.
Yeah.
But people don't ever think about it, and they just think this guy got lucky on this day and a buck come out there to eat. But there was 3 does out there, and one of them was in heat. It's not early rut. It's just a different estrus cycle. It's all the rut, But I mean, like over here, like I've got deer on camera checking scrapes in October and in March.
Wow.
Like I had 3 bucks chasing a doe in March the 12th last year.
Wow. No, that's
on
crazy.
video, like a camera set on video mode. I actually walked in there. I was actually going in there to pull a camera. I pulled the camera. On the way back out, I cut across a ridge line, going to check for some sign. And when I came across this ridge, there was some bedding up on top. And I'd never been up there, so I went up there to that bedding area and found a trail coming into that with some beds. When I come out the other side of the hill, I found like 4 fresh scrapes. They weren't very big, but they were brand new. It looked like they'd been done that day. And it was March the 8th or something like that.
Really?
And I was like, man, this is weird.
That's crazy.
Like at first, I really thought that it was like a coyote had taken a dump and covered it. I was like, that can't be a scrape.
Yeah.
And then I started finding like 3 or 4 of them and found a couple of little fresh rubs. So I just took my camera and put it back up on those scrapes and turned it on. I was like, whatever. So anyway, I went back about a month later and pulled that camera, and there were 3 young bucks. All of them was about a year old, and there was a doe that had come in there like 3 or 4 times. I've got a video of her on my computer peeing in that scrape several times. And she'd come over and squat, pee in it. And then every once in a while, you'd see her run by. And I always set my cameras on video. And I'd highly suggest doing that because I've never, well, not just that, but that doe had 3 bucks behind her, one video. And in a picture, all you get a picture of is a doe. You know what I mean? I mean, even the shutter time, it didn't take 2 seconds. And all 4 deer had come by. But on that same spot, there were 7 does coming down that trail. And I've never seen that many does in one spot over there ever. You know what I mean? So it was interesting watching the videos on that particular spot. It was almost like there were so many does compared to the rest of the property that there weren't even enough bucks to have bred them. So they kept going into estrus until March.
Could have been.
So it's one of those places where you could go February or whenever, January 31st or whenever the end of deer season is in Zone D, and Mike could go over there and kill a bucket and rut.
Yeah.
That's, I guarantee they're rutting all the time out there. It seems like.
Yeah. Well, and it just depends on those specific does, and I started learning that even in the hunting clubs, if you got a couple hundred acres, even there may be 2 spots on that property that if you pay attention to when all the good bucks are killed and where, not just because you begin to learn, well, stand number 22 is a good stand. There's always a big buck killed on 22, or people will say 22 is due. I can't believe ain't nobody killed a good one. Well, then all of a sudden somebody does. And it's like, well, there it is. And nobody thinks anything about it, but you start looking back for the history of that stand. And for the last 10 years, there was a buck killed there between, December the 28th and the 30th. And it's like, everybody's expecting it to get killed in November. They're hunting it every day because it's a good stand, but then there's also been 5 good bucks killed off of 18 on the 12th of November. It's like these weird things. And when you start paying attention to that and writing it all down, then all of a sudden you have got a concrete plan where it's like, people are asking you, they're like, have you seen a giant buck over there? Something's like, no. But you're hunting the same stand every single day for a week, for no reason at all. It's not rut.
Well,
it actually is.
Whenever I start jumping bucks during a rut on this ridge or whatever, I put that pin down, and on that week's time, I'm going to be in there because I know if one mature buck was in there last year at this time, probably more than that time.
It's every time. Like my big 10-point I told you I killed when I was 15. When I was 21, I went in there and killed another 10-point off the same trail. And my buddy Jeremy that I hunt with over there, good friend of mine I grew up with, I took him as a guest one year, and I had a climber up on that trail where I'd killed those 2 bucks, and there was an old wooden ladder stand. This was back before metal ladder stands, I took him, and all he wanted to do was shoot a doe. And I was like, well, I'll go put you in the middle of this old cutover. There was about 6 cutovers in there, that's where we hunted in between all of them. And I'd killed, by that time, I'd killed 5 or 6 bucks out of that area. And I told Jeremy, I said, if you'll just go get in that wooden ladder stand, I promise you a doe's going to come across that road. And he went and got in it. Well, that morning, about 7 o'clock, I had a doe come running through there in a little 8-point. And he wasn't quite big enough. I passed on him. He run under me. And a little while later, I had a 6-point come in behind him. Well, then Jeremy shot. And I was thinking, good, he got him a doe. Well, this is before cell phones, so we were going to come out at 12. Well, I sat there till 12 o'clock, got on 4-wheeler and drove down there. When I got to him, it was like he's losing his mind. Like it was like 20 degrees outside, and he done took his shirt off. He's got a cigarette pacing back and forth. He said, where have you been? And I said, well, I mean, you said we were going to hunt till 12. I said, you kill a doe? He said, no. I said, what'd you kill? He said, a doe come across the road. He said, and then a 4-point and a 6-point and a big 7-point. He said, then I shot the biggest deer I've ever seen. I said, did you kill the 7-point? He said, no. He said, this deer's a moose. I said, well, where's it at? He said, you just wait till you see it. He said, I hadn't touched it. I said, all right, well,
that's nice.
He said, go to the ladder stand. So I went walking over there, and this buck's laying there under this ladder stand. The ladder stand's 12 foot tall, probably. And the buck, this doe had run across this road. The cutover was so thick you can't even see in it hardly. The doe would come run across the road with these bucks behind it, and all of a sudden this buck come through, and he'd shot it between the shoulder blades. He had to stand up in the stand to shoot it. It was a 14-point. It was 22 inches inside spread.
Wow.
Had like 6-inch stickers coming off of both G2s. Like the stickers on the ground, and the buck is like 26 inches wide, tine to tine. Like I walked over there, and I was like, what is that? He just dies laughing. He said, I told you I killed the biggest buck on the property. I said, what in the world? He paid $20 for a guest fee.
Wow.
And kill it here. But over the period of years, that area, I mean, we shot 8 or 9 bucks in a 200-acre area in a 5-day period. But that was back when I used to hunt that spot for 3 months. I hunted there every day because it was like, this is a good spot. I just have to get lucky and see the buck.
Yeah.
But the same bucks were probably 100 acres away on different does, 3 weeks before.
So what are y'all doing kind of once rut's over and it's late season? What's y'all's plan then? Because it really changes right there.
Tough. Yeah, it gets really tough. I learned something from Jamie McKay last year, and that is you just keep going hunting. Jamie will look for a deer until it's dead.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, like I've got a lot of respect for Jamie because he's
relentless.
He's persistent.
He is extremely, I mean, like real mad at him. Like he doesn't make as much, he makes some plans, but he goes in after them, like he wants to find them that day. And last year was maybe the hardest deer hunting year I've ever experienced. I mean, no food, no deer.
Hardest too, yeah.
It was rough. And when I was about ready, like we had actually quit hunting the forest. We didn't even hunt the last hunt over there, the last gun hunt, because we just we weren't seeing anything. We was wore out. I mean, you're beat up, man. By that time of year hunting that terrain, between your back and your knees and you're just done. You'd lose 20 pounds, it's hard. Yeah. And I'm a taxidermist, so I'm like taking all these deer in, it's rough, but yeah, like mentally you're shot. And we've got that leash, down there, and our rut don't start down there till 1st of January. So it was like kind of pre-rut. I was like, let's just go down there and start hunting. So we did. And that week, Jamie killed 2 in 2 days that were monsters.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, how in the world? And he told me, he said, he said, the places I normally have had luck, he said, I just had to abandon. He said, and I went looking. And he said, I looked, and then he was on for weeks. And then finally he found one and then killed another one, but he killed 2 good deer.
That's when late season, that's when I kind of like start making mistakes. And it's for being impatient. Because I start getting like psychologically pressure on myself. Man, everybody's killing. I ain't killing nothing. I suck at this and that. And then staying still in one area becomes harder and harder and harder. And that's when I started stumbling across the place.
Yeah.
Bumping deer. And then I realized like, if I should have stayed there where I was, this could have happened. This and that. But I guess
it's hard though. It's so slow in late season there, and it's cold. It is slow.
Yeah, the hardest thing about late season is, it's like you were saying too, is by that point in time, if you haven't been successful, in your mind you think it's because you messed your spot up.
Yeah.
So you have quit trying to hunt it hard because you assume the deer have already been blowed out of there. And it's like you were saying earlier, sometimes it's not the case, and all of a sudden you just kill one, and it's like, I can't believe he's still here. And I just had the best day of hunting ever in my life. And you were ready to quit. But
and honestly, the one I killed, it wasn't like a straight up, like a really mature buck. But now it's gave me that confidence for like, okay, I had a plan and it worked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
It can work again. Just keep throwing this stuff together. Do what you think's right and go for it.
Right.
Just give it time.
Like last season, during early and mid season, I missed 5 times with my bow.
Right.
Now, thanks to God, it was does, because if it would have been bugs, I'd be in a mental hospital right now.
I did it 4 times the last 2 years on big bucks. that makes you feel any better.
Yeah,
I've lost 3 just doing something stupid.
Yep.
So yeah,
Now,
I get that.
Me too.
I did kill 5 of those. So I was 10 opportunities that I created, which was very good. But then I hit a wall. And throughout the whole month of like December, not a thing. Then I just kept on pushing, like I said, kept pushing. And then around January, that's when I had the 2 opportunities with 2 big bucks, man, back to back with a high power rifle in my hands.
Yeah.
One of them could take a shot, just it wasn't the best thing to do. I mean, I could try to like hard shot at Texas way, in the hind quarter, and chase them all the way to Montgomery County, but it wasn't the point. And then the second one, he saw me climbing up the tree.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I'm at that point, man, where it's like it's a matter of time before I can actually put a good one on the ground. And the best thing about it is that I'm just not anticipating, and I'm not like waiting. Man, when is it going to happen? I really want to like this. Whenever it happens, it's going to happen. And that's what I'm just gonna enjoy my journey until that happens.
That's the best thing you can do. And as far as just like bow hunting in general, what I've kind of learned is every day I always practice at 30 yards. I just sit at 30 yards on my porch, shooting 30 yards at my target. And then I don't even shoot 20s, and I don't shoot 40s, 50s, and 60s. I know what my bow will do at that distance.
Right.
But if I have a buck come out at 40 yards, well, it's kind of a crapshoot anyway, just because it's pretty thick.
That's just a hard
anyway.
shoot.
Yeah. So, I mean,
especially early season.
Yeah. So if I can hit 30, okay, I know I can aim and shoot my bow. Well, that's kind of a shoot anyway. You're going to be sticks you're probably not going to see.
Right.
So I really don't practice for 40, but it sounds bad, and I'd hate to do it, but you might have to, just shoot at some does when you don't think you're steady enough, just to get that.
Yeah.
That
confidence back in.
Yep.
Because something I realized,
or just get used to it.
Yeah. Mr. Tony told me this. He said, bow hunting is 90% psychological.
Yep.
And 10% on the field, which is.
Watch when you shoot your bow. You'll be shooting it good, and all of a sudden you'll start doing something stupid with your wrist.
It changes.
And you'll start missing it.
Right.
And then if you go back the next day, then it's like you're calm and you're one with your bow.
Yep.
And it's just click, center, click, hitting the other arrow. And then that next day you start doing jerking something stupid.
Yeah, it was weird. After I had heart surgery, I started having these weird like panic attacks, and I don't know if it was like my body being partially in shock. Like it went on for like 2 years. Like it was weird, kind of like PTSD almost. But I was having target panic real bad. I never have in my entire life.
Like the anxiety builds up when you're trying to let that shot off, and it just kind of.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, it was like I wouldn't get nervous. Like I mean, I don't really get nervous when I see a big buck anymore.
Yeah.
Like I see him,
It's
and I'm
kinda
like,
kill mode.
there it
Yeah.
is. It's time for him to die.
Yeah.
So I'd get my stuff ready, get ready to shoot, and then when I would go to pull the trigger, it was like my whole body came to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It was like yanking, and like I shot it. I shot at two. I hit one of them in Missouri, 2 big bucks with my bow, and lost the one I shot, and then missed one, the biggest buck I've ever shot at in my life. I missed him, and then last year I shot the one in Bankhead, lost him, and then shot a big buck down at our lease and cut hair off of him, and then killed this one. So I was actually I should have killed 3 big ones last year, but finally. Like when I finally killed that deer, it had gotten to the point I'd missed so many times. I've only missed 5 bucks in my life.
Yeah.
And I missed 4 in 2 years, 4 of them. And it was like, man, ever since I had surgery, I can't hit anything, and I can shoot targets, but it's like, I know right up till the shot, I'm like, this is perfect. This is perfect. This is perfect. And I would shoot and I would be like, what am I doing? I didn't even know my crosshairs weren't in the right place.
Yeah.
I would just panic. It was like panic, like target panic.
Man, I'm on panic mode. As soon as I seen him, I'm like, "Oh God, please help me! Please help me!"
Right when they show
it's
up,
happening. Yeah. Oh my God! And I don't know.
This year, I'm hoping that I've got it fixed. Like what I finally started doing, I started noticing that, like what you were talking about, shooting my bow. I would go out there to shoot because I haven't practiced a whole lot in several years with my bow. I've killed a bunch of deer with my bow, but I would go out there, shoot it, make sure it was sighted in. I'm like, I'm not touching it because if something messes up on it, I won't be able to hunt. So I'm like, I'd go hunting, I'd shoot a deer and kill it and go to the house. Well, after my surgery, I was so weak, I couldn't even draw my bow.
Yeah.
So I started trying to draw it. Finally got to where I could draw it and got to where I could shoot it, but my shoulders at where they cut me up through my sternum and they have to spread you open. And so everything now is different. Everything pops and I've got like weird places in my shoulder that hurt all the time, and just from that surgery. So like it doesn't. My anchor point's not even the same. Like everything has changed. So this year I was like, you know what? Like I've got these good deer on camera. I'm going to have to bow hunt them some days. There's not a gun hunt.
Yeah.
So I've got to shoot it like I'm trying to kill. Like I've got to get this out of my head. I've got to get back physically right. So I've been shooting a lot about the last 3 months. And so what you were talking about, I'd go out there one day and try to shoot.
You're not with your bow.
Just wasn't. Yeah, it was like somebody else's bow. I was like, what is this thing? And then other days it was just like you can't miss. It's like mentally you're going to hit, and you do. And the problem, it's like I was saying after my surgery, I had lost that ability, like that feeling of confidence. It's like I didn't even remember what it felt like. It was like everything I was doing was new, like I'd never done it before. So I actually started pulling my bow back because I was having some days where I was really like slinging arrows. I would draw and leave my pin on the target as long as I could hold it, and then let down. When I wanted to shoot, I would just let down. And I would do that over and over. And I did it for like I don't know, months, like 2 months, where I never shot an arrow. I was like, the only way I'm going to get my shoulder used to holding this bow and my brain used to knowing I don't have to shoot is if I just don't shoot. I have to convince myself that I don't have to pull the trigger. And I've gotten to where now I don't shoot until that pin is on that bullseye. And I'm hoping, like mentally, when I pick my bow up now, I'm like, I can get that bullseye.
Man, that happened to me one time, the only time that I was able to control myself. And it's the craziest thing ever. I was up there and a doe was walking. She's about 40. She's walking towards me and I said, yes, sir, it's happening. And I'm so nice and calm, laser focused. Do I grab my bow and I go ahead and put my release just to realize that I don't have an arrow on it. And then I lost it.
Yeah.
Then I'm in my quiver and I'm going all over the place. I mean, think about a woodpecker up there. Seriously, that's what all the reckoning that I was doing. But I was able to put an arrow and shoot out of it when she was maybe about 20. I broke her spine. She went down there and then I took another arrow and killed it. And I was like, dude, think about this would have been a big buck.
Yeah,
I probably just kind of like jump on top of him. I mean, might as well. It's just gonna scare him off
like a horse.
Yeah, but I was,
great.
dude, I was convinced like I got superpowers now. I can control myself, and I'm going in full mode, and I ain't got no arrow on my bow, man.
yeah, it screws everything up.
Yes, it was.
That's why I switched from a finger release to a thumb release. Because when I see a buck, I wasn't ready. I'd have to take my eyes off what he's doing, make movement, do it. And it's always on my wrist, dangling, smacking something,
and then your
making
brain
noise.
goes crazy.
Yeah, so now I got the thumb release and it stays on there.
Right.
When I see one, just grab.
Right.
Now I'm ready. Instead of it smacking freaking everything.
That's a good point because I have a finger release.
I can't hardly shoot a thumb release. I grew up shooting a thumb release, and I tried to do it again a few years ago, and I'm so used to a finger release now. But I tell you, like,
I'm better with it.
Really?
The thumb, yeah.
Well, having to do all the stuff I was telling you, I had to change, the way I'm shooting my bow and everything. Like, I ended up actually readjusting my length even on my release to where it was just it was weird because my anchor point changed and all this stuff changed. Even like the way that when you come back and you anchor your elbow and it kind of sits right there in place. Well, my shoulder don't want to do that anymore. The tightness in it almost feels like a torn rotator cuff. It's just like messed up. So by lengthening my length of my string about a half inch, it allows that distance to where it's set comfortably, and it's like it kind of picked that back up. But it was weird, like having to relearn, what you're doing after doing it for 4 years. Yeah.
Now I still shoot every now and then with my finger release, just to know I still got it with it.
Right.
But yeah, not having that thing on my wrist smacking stuff, the worrying about having to get it on, you just walking through the woods, one jumps up, it's got to grab
already
the
there.
pole. Yeah. I mean that's, and how I practice is I'll let that your release down, or not release, but the that your arrow sits in.
Yeah, your rest, your drop away.
Yeah, I'll let my drop away down, set my arrow on top of it, and I'll slowly pull it back and keep it in there
to make it lift it up instead of just leaving it up.
Yeah, and I practice doing that. Just get that slow draw to where I'm not like coming back at, because my Matthew has those cams.
Yeah.
If you come back too fast, it'll make a weird noise.
Makes that little tink. Yeah.
And I just want to practice being smooth and steady and keeping the arrow in there and popping it up. Now, when I hunt, I'll flip it up.
Right.
But just to practice getting it slow and steady, not making a lot of movement or noise. That's what I'll do.
Yeah. Have y'all ever killed a deer post rut?
I've killed one, but it was rifle, and it was a long time ago, private land.
I have
I don't think I ever have.
private. I've missed opportunities on public, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Food.
Yeah.
Hunt food is what I would do.
Yeah.
That's what I have.
Which, like I said, growing up, I mean, our rut was the last week of deer season. It was January 20-something, and the season then ended the 31st. So this is new for me hunting post rut.
Yeah. No, up there, that area where I was talking y'all about, the rut is usually mid-January.
Really?
Yeah. So you get the chance that you can hunt this one and then going up here on, he said it.
Right.
And then you move up north and you keep coming kind of like a.
Chase the
around.
rut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to do that, man.
Mm-hmm.
Because before Onyx, well, I mean, that's what it is, but before Onyx, man, I was very limited. I remember I was like, "What? So where's the public land at?" They're like, "There's a road right there, and just drive it there."
Yeah, man,
area.
that was hard. I remember
Yes.
that when I was a kid. We came up here one time because somebody killed a monster in Bankhead Forest, and I was living in Birmingham. I was like, we need to go there and hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we got the little
Mistake.
paper map, and come up here and started driving around trying to find somewhere to hunt. Oh, it was a nightmare.
not getting lost too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah, and you get lost close to the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
we
It all
did the
looks the
other
same.
day.
Yeah, we really did. We went to one place that I hunted last year that was a road. There were trucks actually driving in and out of this gate that they had open. And this year the gate was closed and the road had grown up where I took you in there and I was like, there's a road here. And you're like, where? And I was like, I promise this is a road. But you could not, it was like 10 foot tall, like weeds and little plants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't. I told him, I said, if we don't get out of here before dark, we're going to have to wait on help.
I was just hoping on a rattler. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Seriously, I said it was going to be a matter of time.
Yeah, we're going to get
Because
there
it
by
was
snake.
thick.
Yeah.
man.
You better have them snake guards on
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What's some things that y'all would say to each other, or say to new hunters that are just getting into it? What's some things you'd say to kind of keep them encouraged?
Man, what I would say to anybody is don't quit.
Yeah.
Just never quit.
That's exactly what
You
I
know,
was going to say, actually.
Keep pushing because it's going to get hard. It's going to be rough. And then you're going to lose all hope. But you never know what's around the corner. So you got to keep on pushing. This is what it is.
Yeah, and from a taxidermist standpoint, the same point.
Yeah.
I see so many deer that are killed injured or old. And it goes back to having a dog. Like my dog has diabetes and cataracts. And I don't know, I've done a little bit of research and I've never seen where deer have much common, they don't usually get cataracts, but they probably get certain things when they get older.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, my dog went blind in 1 month. He could see perfectly fine and was completely blind in 4 weeks.
Boy.
So let's assume a deer can have something happen to it, whether it's natural or whatever.
Break its nose or
something crazy fighting, But if you're not in the woods, you can't kill a deer. And I see a lot of big deer, a lot of the really big deer that I mount, something happened to them that changed their day. And they got shot. A lot of times that story is, I can't believe he showed up during daylight and he just walked out here behind the house, or he walked out and then I cape it. And I'm like, this guy, man, he was hurting.
Yeah.
And you don't want to tell the hunter, well, you only killed this deer because it was busted up. But at the same time, if you're there, like I said, you're looking for that weakness.
Yep.
As a hunter, you're trying to find an advantage, whether it's a food source or a water source. So what's the difference in a fresh injury?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to hunt a buck, I mean, right when you think you're as discouraged as you're going to get, you don't need to hunt no more. If you go that one more day, you will end up shooting one eventually.
Yeah. Something else that I will tell to a new hunter is don't let nobody criticize your harvest.
No.
Be proud of what you shoot. Keep shooting where you want to shoot, and keep enjoying and keep pushing, man, because, I mean, if we don't keep this tradition going, sooner or later, we're sometimes it seems like we're right on the doors that it could be taken away.
Right.
Yep.
So we as hunters, we got to be as responsible and as ethical as possible, but keep shooting, keep putting deer on your belt,
They're just going to give you
and keep
more
posting them on
experience.
social media.
Yes,
if it's a
don't be
spike,
ashamed.
if it's a spike, put it on social media. I was seeing more and more people about the last year or so are starting to take up for those folks. You know, when somebody posts a deer that they don't think should have been shot and they say something, people are just jumping on them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everybody's tired of hearing all that garbage.
Yeah.
I do myself.
Everybody's done it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, a lot of people that saying that has done it. I mean, anybody that grows up hunting, if you can't shoot some little deer, you'll never learn how to shoot a big one. Like you got to get that out of you got to get some under your belt to get that nervousness out, to get your confidence up. You know, and if you can find a little buck, a lot of times you can find a big buck. So I mean, you got to start somewhere.
That's right.
I don't care if you're 80 years old. Like there's a lot of deer I mount for guys that are 70 that just killed their first buck in their life. You know, and it may be at 90 inches, and they're as excited as an 8-year-old that just shot their first doe.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome.
So you don't want to. I mean, there's no reason to tell somebody why they shouldn't have shot because the deer's dead and it's theirs and they wanted it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, guys, we really appreciate y'all having us on. And for the listeners, this will be on video on the Cedar Ridge Chronicles. So,
Not Cedar Creek, Cedar Ridge.
yeah,
That's
Cedar
right.
Ridge.
Yeah. Anybody that's ever heard Pablo call my place Cedar Creek, there is no such place
I
at my
haven't
house.
seen that for like 2 years. Yeah. Then
He tells everybody Cedar Creek.
Yeah.
We got to find somewhere named Cedar Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're getting a lot of publicity from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they
They
are.
appreciate it. They need to meet you.
They need to send you a check.
That's
At this
right.
point.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the publicity.
Yeah.
No, guys, it's been an honor, man. I mean,
Yeah, appreciate y'all having us.
appreciate it a
Thank
lot.
you.
Glad y'all
This is
come
a
over.
blast.
Been a great time.
Yeah, I've had a blast. Well, guys, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yes,
thank
sir.
y'all. So, everybody, just real quick, like, subscribe, comment, because this thing is going to go off the roof. You know, right here, we got great guests, we got great hunters, we got great hunts. This podcast should deserve all the likes and comments that you can get on Spotify and
Spotify, Apple, anywhere.
Apple, anywhere. Like, comment, man, send it to a friend of yours. So if they have a great guest, know somebody that's been a killer, and try to stay under kind of like under the radar, this is the place to put him on and get an interview with y'all.
Oh, yeah.
So, man, what a blast. God bless America, and let's go hunt tomorrow morning.
Let's do it. Good luck, everybody.
Yes, sir.